across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Quite a lot to talk about today, as every day. I mean, I'm going to have to stop saying that because every time I think, oh, how are we going to get through all of this? Well, in the last hour, we have seen the publication in particular of the grooming gang inquiry, terms of reference, what they're going to cover, how long it's going to last, and we're going to go through all of that. And that looks, I've got to be honest with you, I think that's looking very promising. I mean, let's try and give some benefit of the doubt. I'm not sure many of the victims and survivors will feel like anyone deserves any benefit of the doubt over what they've been through and how they've been failed by every institution, every government along the way. But we're going to be talking about that. We're also going to be discussing yet another crisis at the BBC. Radio 2 host Scott Mills being sacked over his personal conduct. We're going to be talking about Keir Starmer's 48-hour ultimatum to junior doctors to call off reckless strikes. But isn't it quite reckless to threaten to get rid of 4,000 doctors' training places? We're the ones who want those because we're the patients, mate. We're also going to be talking about Shaman Mahmood, the Home Secretary, demands for basically payment upon results from the French over those migrant crossings. The deal ends today that would... You know, the one we're paying for that's not yielding results, that one ends today. So French officials are apparently resisting. Well, we'll talk about all of that. Talk about, obviously, the international situation with Iran as well and the economic impact of that. I mean, you name it, it's going to be on the show in the next few hours. Joining me for all the chat, delighted to say, is the editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. Before I read out the question, I suppose I need to tell you about the terms of this independent inquiry into grooming gangs. I mean, it's important to remember the history of this, isn't it? And we were talking about, what was it? Was it 2011? The first article on the front page of the Times by, sadly, Andrew Norfolk, now deceased, crime correspondent on the Times, who said he himself had been really wary about writing about this stuff because it was like the accusations were going to be, you're basically saying a whole load of, you know, Pakistani, Muslim heritage men are raping young white working class girls and getting away with it because they were young white working class girls and no one cared about them apparently, and because they were Pakistani Muslim men and no one in the local authorities or the police or social services wanted to kick up a fuss because, you know, racism, community cohesion. We're now in 2026. It's a long time. This inquiry is finally starting work. Well, terms of inquiry today, they're actually going to start, you know, looking at evidence from April. This is something that in January last year, the Prime Minister said calling for a national public inquiry was jumping on a far-right bandwagon. And now we've actually got one. But December, we finally, in December last year, after June, an announcement, December last year, we finally had it formally established and we knew who the panel was, we knew the chair was going to be the former Children's Commissioner, Baroness Anne Longfield. A lot of people being rejected by those victims and survivors who were advising the panel. So the chair has said today she has vowed to not flinch from uncomfortable truths. She said that very, very clearly. The inquiry is going to look at the ethnicity, culture or religion of either perpetrators or victims, whether that influenced patterns of offending and whether these factors shape the institutional response. I think the answer is yes and yes. It said that the inquiry will not avoid questions that previous reviews chose not to address. It's going to be specifically focused on grooming gangs, not other forms of sexual exploitation within, say, family homes and the like. It's going to very specifically look at institutions like the police, like local authorities, like care homes, whether they failed to protect children. There's going to be a national inquiry. It's got a budget of 65 million quid. It's going to have offices in London, in Wales and in Leeds. It's going to finish its work by March 2028. So we're looking at a 3-year inquiry, which is fast, according to these things. But there are also going to be individual town and city inquiries, each with a budget of £5 million. Only one of those has been confirmed so far. I'm wondering if London is going to be one of those. I think that might need more than a £5 million budget. It's going to go back 30 years, all the way to 1996. It has statutory powers. It can compel witnesses to give evidence under oath. So they are required to speak honestly. There's going to be ongoing reports, so it's not going to rolling reports. It's not going to just wait. Like everything's been given in evidence, but there's no report until 3 years on. As they go along, they're going to issue reports, but also they're going to be sharing information with the NCA to look into basically prosecutions as well. Look, on the face of it, it's all sounding good. It is all looking very promising. The question is how much we trust that. I want to know your thoughts on this. What is your reaction? The chair says it will not flinch from uncomfortable truths. What's your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Text us on 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Tom Slater, does this for you? Does this sound like? I mean, in black and white, tick 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 tick. How much do we trust this over what's happened over all these years?
Well, I think this inquiry has to earn that trust now. Yeah. It's been shattered over decades and decades and decades now. I mean, the first time this was ever raised in politics, in public discussion, that I was aware of was 2004, Anne Cryer, Labour MP for Keighley.
Yeah.
We're more than 20 years since then. If you look at some of the other reports which have gone on in Telford or Rotherham or other parts of the country, they suggest that maybe this horror has been going on since the 1970s and 1980s.
And by the way, still going on.
Absolutely. So the fact that we finally get this inquiry, even after Keir Starmer seemingly tried to dilute it by spreading its remit far beyond this particular horrific scandal that we've been talking about and covering up for so long, I think now it's very much up for this inquiry, for its chair, and for, broadly speaking, the government to demonstrate that it is worth putting our faith and our trust in, because that trust and that faith has been shattered so many times over the past few years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really, just full of admiration and gratitude to those survivors. Okay, some prefer to be called victims, some prefer to be called survivors, so that's very clear. And a right to be called what they want in that circumstance. And the ones who did speak out and say, no, we don't want, a bloke who used to run police forces or someone who used to do this and that to run this inquiry. We don't trust you. The institutions that you ran are exactly the institutions that failed us. We don't trust that. We are not taking us seriously, and this can't be about every single child that's ever been abused. Sexual abuse is horrific. It largely happens within families. The biggest risk to your child being sexually abused is a male relative or friend. That's as simple as that. We're talking about stuff, though, that was reported and was known about, was happening in plain sight, and nothing was done to deal with it. Indeed, sometimes it was deliberately covered up and protected by the authorities because of the nature of the abuse. Joe McCarr was just talking about how this is like the biggest stain on our society. I would say certainly in my lifetime, this certainly feels like, because we've had the awful scandals over Hillsborough and the cover up there, and numerous other cover ups and scandals and failings. But the thing about this one, it's the scale, it's the length of the cover up, it's the huge number of victims, it's the motivation for the cover up by so many different people, and the blatant, clear punishment of anyone who spoke out. Maggie Oliver, who we're going to speak to on the show tomorrow, sadly not available today, who's been so crucial and exposed the Rochdale grooming gangs in Manchester. And she went to the senior police and said, why are you not allowing us to investigate this? And she had to leave her job to be able to do her job, effectively, of trying to prevent this wrongdoing. And it is, it's so heartbreaking that young girls were failed, because white working class girls, they're probably slags. They were getting paid in booze and drugs, and kebabs. So, it's okay that someone put a cigarette out on them after gang raping them and passing them around their mates while they were off their heads on alcohol to cope with the abuse they were getting. The disgusting attitude that not just the men who were doing the abuse had towards these girls, the attitudes of the social workers, the hospital workers, the police, the local councils, MPs, the Parliament, the government, everybody had towards these girls, as if they were expendable. They didn't matter.
And that's the reason that it was ignored for so long, that along with the crippling political correctness that gripped police forces and local councils, which convinced them somehow that it was better and more morally virtuous to ignore the industrial scale rape of girls, because otherwise we'd rock the multicultural boat.
It's so hard to even comprehend that was the reason.
Exactly, and we already know that this scandal can be measured in decades, can be measured in at least thousands of perpetrators, at least tens of thousands of victims. We know that this has been ignored for many, many years, but at the same time we also know we're only really starting to scratch the surface. We read about in the news Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, Newcastle, Oxford, in Scotland as well there's been cases of this, London more recently.
Oh, not in London. Have you not checked with Sadiq Khan? No, not a problem in London.
Yeah, somehow we're completely
which is a massive big city of 10 million people. Absolutely not. It's been a problem in 50 other cities and towns around the country. Not a problem in London.
Amazingly,
Didn't you get the memo?
Completely immune. And it's one horrific story, one kind of localised report, as we've seen periodically after another. So hopefully this does become, yes, about justice, but also about clarity on what went on here. And I think the other thing that follows on from this is what are the consequences that are going to be felt by those who weren't just engaged in the horrific depraved crimes, but also the morally depraved cover-up.
Do you know what one of the reactions online is going to be to this? The most important thing is we mustn't have is a growth in Islamophobia. Yeah. Because of this, because of the focus on Pakistani Muslims. They always say it's Asian men. It's not Asian men. Don't tar all men with from Asia the same brush. It's particularly Pakistani heritage Muslim men who are particularly implicated in this. I mean, again, I don't want there to be backlash against anybody for their faith or their colour of their skin or their heritage, nationality over the crimes of other people. But I have to say, we are talking about crimes that were known about in the local community. Okay, these men were operating in plain sight, right? They were all known. They all knew each other's names. There were local elected councillors who were part of the group, basically the abuse, and who were protecting it, and police officers and the like. I do not believe that in most of these towns and cities this was unknown to a lot of people who weren't taking part, but they didn't speak out. That's also a problem for me.
That is also a problem. No, absolutely. And it's also why didn't they speak out? I understand grimly why people who might be related to some of these scumbags didn't speak out.
Well, you think like the women, their wives are probably being abused as well and their own children.
Of course, that doesn't excuse the behaviour, but that makes sense. What I don't understand is why councillors, politicians, people who weren't of that community, shall we say, had no other incentive to cover this up, whether that's to, I do not understand why over many decades that is what has taken place. And also, as you say, the deflections and the obfuscation continues, because you read the news reports today and it's like Asian grooming gangs. We've known for a very long time, not exclusively, but certainly where it was ignored and covered up in large parts of the North and the Midlands and so on. Specifically Pakistani Muslim, also specifically coming from particular parts of Pakistan, the Mirpur.
Basically a very, very backward, medieval part. The parts of Pakistan you basically may as well be in the Dark Ages.
Which have long-standing problems with this kind of abuse, and that's kind of been transplanted into the UK. But it was almost the point.
Oh, have we imported another problem? Have we?
It was almost as if they would rather be racist and throw everyone under the bus than talk about this issue specifically. So I think it's one of those things where we've read so much about this, we've seen so much news reports about it now that the kind of dam has burst, but we're only really at the very beginning of getting to grips with why this happened and why it was covered up, and those are the two big questions.
And all credit to people. Look, I know that Rupert Lowe massively fell out with Nigel Farage. Rupert Lowe's and messages from Charlie Peters at GB. All credit to him. Stuff that he's been exposing. Got massive time for the amazing reporting he's done actually in the courts, exposing the actual horrific nature of the abuse that was going on. And then Elon Musk, sending it around the world, and then it became a national embarrassment, and then finally we had our politicians out. And I say Rupert Lowe, he's been carrying out his so-called grooming inquiry. It's not. It's not an inquiry in any true sense of the word, but he's kept it on the agenda. All credit to him, and all credit to the journalists who kept looking into this, and many of the politicians. You mentioned, you say Anne Cryer again, but lots of the people who spoke about this, often women MPs, were basically threatened with your career's over if you don't shut the hell up. That tells you something, doesn't it? It really does. Let's also talk about, I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. I can see a lot of you already getting in touch. Let's talk about Scott Mills, BBC Radio 2 host. He's the Radio 2 breakfast show host, 6.5 million listeners. He's the biggest basic radio host in the country. He was also commentator on Eurovision and the like. He's won Race Across the World. He's a big fellow in entertainment at BBC, and he's been sacked summarily, just like that, over the revelation that he was probed by police back in 2016 over serious sexual offences, the police say, against a teenage boy. He wasn't charged. They didn't have the threshold, past the threshold evidence. By all accounts, now a young man who watched the Hugh Edwards documentary about the grooming that took place there by Hugh Edwards, the BBC News presenter, and got in contact with, I believe, either the police or the Daily Mirror, I think the Daily Mirror, and said, look, this happened to me, but it was someone else. It feels like the BBC has got to shut this down straight away because the new Director General's coming in soon. Tim Davie leaves on Thursday as Director General. They just wanted to shut this down. I don't know what happened. I don't know what the alleged offences are. I don't know, what the evidence there was that wasn't sufficient. Now, it may have been back in 2016, they had an evidentiary requirement that I think most of us would regard as too high now. Maybe other people have come forward and therefore it's a pattern of behaviour. And again, Hugh Edwards, a lot of the stuff that hasn't come out is that there was a pattern of behaviour among male colleagues that he was behaving the same way towards. So, there's a lot more into that story. He wasn't the good guy who was, taken to the cleaners by the Sun. Far, far from it. So we don't know what's happened. But I'm intrinsically uncomfortable. I want somebody who is, if there's been a sexual offence, if he's groomed someone when they were 16 and he was in his 40s or they were 19, that's unacceptable. But he wasn't charged. He wasn't convicted. I feel very uncomfortable about people losing their jobs over someone making an allegation.
Yes, and that's why when stories like this go up, we have to sort of maintain that level of scepticism, maintain that level of innocent until proven guilty, even where this isn't a purely legal procedure anymore. Because it seems where the BBC are concerned, there could be two very plausible outcomes that have happened here. One of which is that, like has happened so many times before, they've failed to react to a clear problem in their midst, clear wrongdoing, and that they drag their feet and now have been forced to act in the right way. Alternatively, because we've also seen cases of this over the years, where in the face of public scrutiny, often because of bad things the BBC has done or hasn't done in the past, they overreact in other instances and just desperately want a story to go away, and therefore due process and
then
fairness,
he's thrown under the bus.
Either of those two things can be possible where the BBC is concerned because of just how terribly it has handled these kinds of cases.
It may be there are numerous claims. They've all been dismissed. Oh God, the Mirror's got a hold of one. Now we're going to have to do something, because I'm telling you, the BBC absolutely knew all about Hugh Edwards. Maybe not that particular grooming case that we saw in the documentary. If you haven't seen that Channel 5 docudrama, I cannot recommend it enough. If you still think that Hugh Edwards was hard done by, my mum, I had a chat with her. I said, "Have you watched this?" And she said, "Oh, I did. I thought it was really what people, the way he was treated." I'm like, you need to watch this documentary. As Martin Clunes, the actor playing Hugh Edwards, pointed out, he thought it was a little bit of a nasty sort of tabloid scandal, kind of wasn't a big deal until he actually saw what, the evidence and saw what had actually gone on. I mean, he's a nasty little piece of work, and he'd been behaving like that with a lot of people over a lot of years. And the BBC management knew a hell of a lot. There'd been a huge number of complaints to BBC management about his behaviour within the building, and nothing was done. So I wonder again, has something like that happened here? But we don't know. But then we're all led to believe the worst, aren't we?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's why it's always good to reserve judgment in these situations until full details are published, until full processes take place. But as I said, I'll go back to this point. The BBC, they often underreact and then overreact. So you have something like the Savile scandal, or you have something like the Hugh Edwards scandal. Many, many, many years behaviour, sometimes even crimes, being a kind of open secret within the corporation, and then suddenly they have to react to this
exactly. But also, lots of the articles say, this follows the news of, exit of news anchor Hugh Edwards, along with MasterChef pair Greg Wallace and John Trode. OK, Greg Wallace wasn't accused of something that... I mean, it was crude behaviour and inappropriate office behaviour, and he'd been warned a million times. But John Trode, he made a joke, like an off-colour remark or something. There wasn't... I mean, years ago...
Sung along to a rap song or something.
I know. It was literally... do not put him into the same bracket. I don't even think you should put Greg Wallace into the same bracket. I'm not. You know, it's just. Come on, let's get this in perspective. Again, I don't know the man, never met the guy, I don't listen to Radio 2, but I do feel due process is important and people being treated fairly, whether the accused or the accuser. But there we are. Let's also talk about Keir Starmer. I mean, I think Keir Starmer thinks this is one of his little flexing muscles moments. We've got yet another strike. I mean, another strike by doctors. The 15th strike. You know those strikes that were going to all be over when Labour came into power because the fault of the strikes was the Tory government, nasty, evil Tory government. And Wes Streeting came in as Health Secretary and, with the approval of Starmer and Reeves, he doesn't have any money himself, he hands over a whopping great pay rise. Was it 28% pay rise, 29% over a couple of years pay rise to junior doctors to get them back to work. Literally within 48 hours, they said, we're going to look to strike again. It's not enough. Look, everybody over the austerity years post-banking crash, over the lockdown, unless you're very, very rich, everything's on the stock market, everybody basically lost money, okay? No. Barely anybody, I mean, I'm sure there's some bankers, but barely anybody ended up getting pay rises that covered the cost of all that inflation and the general extra living costs over those years. Doctors apparently think they're completely special and they should be uniquely protected from these things. But we're looking at a pay deal for them, which is, I'm sorry, it's yet again bloody good. It's a 7% pay rise. It would increase the pay for the most experienced junior doctors, known as resident doctors. And by the way, they're not junior. I mean, these people have been in the job 20 years, some of them, for goodness sake, to more than £100,000 if you include things like overtime, weekends and night shifts. But you're still looking at 77 grand basic pay. Now, I want doctors to be well paid. I think that's a good pay packet. I don't think you should be complaining about that pay packet if you work in the public sector, I'm afraid. But they basically wanted to go out and strike. Now, Keir Starmer has given doctors a 48-hour ultimatum to call off what he calls reckless strikes. And he says, basically, if you don't pull this off, I'm going to basically withdraw the offer. And the offer will include it's 1,000 of the 4,000 extra training places which are on offer for doctors. But this is mad because we're the ones who want those training places. It's patients who want more doctors to be trained because, A, why are we importing doctors from abroad when we've got 3,000 or 4,000 youngsters who want to do medicine, who've got grade A levels in the right subjects, but can't get onto a place in a British university because they're only paying 9.5 grand fees, but they'll take a Chinese and Indian or Nigerian student who's paying 30 grand in fees. Those places are available to the ones from abroad, but not to our British students. I would rather be treated by a doctor who was trained here, who spoke fluent English to me. That's what I think most people would feel. I'd like our young, bright people to be able to get ahead. We need more doctors. What a damn stupid ultimatum for the Prime Minister to make.
No, exactly. It's one of those things where he wants to posture against the unions. He wants to show that he's not in their pocket, that he's not just going
Mr.
to
Big Man.
give in. And this is the best that he can come up with. The doctor strikes have been a thorn in the side of many governments, shall we say, particularly over the last few years. They've got much more sort of ideological. The kinds of demands that are being made kind of far outstrip any sort of, usually even junior doctor strikes would incur quite a large level of public support. That's completely gone now, in quite interesting. Also, if you talk to other people who work within the health service, if you talk to paramedics or you talk to porters or nurses or whatever, their patience has run out.
They've had a fraction of the pay rise
as well.
Doctors have got.
The problem is that the government have been kind of flailing around, on the one hand not wanting to grind things to a halt again, but also not wanting to spend money they haven't got, or to look weak in front of the public, who are starting to suspect, not without reason, that they're taking the Michael ever so slightly. So it's one of those difficult positions that Keir Starmer finds himself in, but it's one very much of his own making.
Absolutely. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, is chairing an emergency COBRA meeting today where he's going to be basically calling on the energy companies and big businesses to try and help. It's like, you call these people the enemy, you tax them to the hilt, you tell them they're the baddies, and then you want their help because you run the country's economy so badly. I mean, the Tories did a bad enough job, and you're making it even worse. I mean, I think a lot of those bosses should have just say, no thanks, I'm busy that day, I believe I'm washing my hair rather than turning up. But we'll talk about that with Trevor Kavanagh coming up in a few moments. So much more to talk about. 0344 499 1000 for you to have your say. You give us a call on that number on any of the topics, but in particular, the National Inquiry into grooming gangs finally starting work. They've issued their terms of reference today. The chair says that it will not flinch from uncomfortable truths. What's your reaction? Do you trust that we will get to the bottom of this? Do you trust that anything will change? Because isn't that the most important thing? You need to find out what happened to stop it from happening now and again in the future. That's the crucial thing, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch. We'll get your calls on next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. Very much appreciate your company. 10:30 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. I'm not surprised at all today. An awful lot of you want to have your say on the grooming gangs and those terms of reference we finally had announced. Let's go to Anne, who's in Sussex. Hello, Anne. What do you want to say?
Oh, good morning, Julia. I'm sorry. I still don't have a lot of hope in this proposal because I know that 50-odd years ago, this happened to young girls here in mid-Sussex. And
how do you know that?
I'm afraid I don't want to go too close to tell you. But what I do know is that 6 years ago, I was contacted, and one young woman had really researched and tracked down the perpetrators. They were... Some of them were foreign. They were Pakistanis. One was a footballer, I think, with a pretty high profile.
OK, be careful for me legally, please, just in case.
They went to court, and of course it was thrown out. And that is why I don't have any confidence, because it isn't just...
But would that have just been the lack of evidence 50 years on?
Well, I think...
I mean, we've got to be reasonable. You're taking someone's liberty away. You need to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, I don't think the establishment, and I've been a councillor for 40-odd years. I've been on all kinds of committees and meetings. There is certainly a lack of understanding, and I've seen it with domestic abuse, children in care, of how that other side lives. And how they are blamed for their situations.
Yes.
What happens to them. And I've been disgusted, and it's been a long, long battle, Julia.
Yeah. Well, it's like the notion of sort of underage prostitutes. There's no such thing. They're just victims of abuse. You can't be a prostitute at the age of 15.
Running wild in the evening while the person who's supposed to be looking after the home they're living in, oh, no, don't contact me after 11 o'clock. I go to bed. And then, of course, things happen. I've seen the neglect and the fallout, but the victims are the ones that have been a worry for me, because to be abused or badly treated in childhood affects not just the victim, it's the generations.
Yes. Oh, it's an absolute travesty. I absolutely feel every word of what you said, and I'm sure our other listeners and viewers do as well. And thank you for your call. Appreciate that. Jack is on the line in Exeter. Now, Jack, it's actually not your real name, which will be, with reasons for that will become obvious.
Correct. Hi.
Hi.
So my other half was a counsellor of victims of abuse for a long time. And she told me a long, long time ago, before all this came about, in order for child abuse to continue for decades, you need institutions not turning a blind eye, not covering up, but involved. It cannot happen without. The institutions are education, care system, the police, and the judiciary. They are involved. And
when you say involved, do you mean men taking part in the abuse?
Correct.
And
think about this. You've got a few thousand young girls being abused and raped. So there will be gynecological issues. There will be pregnancies. There'll be
we had like 50-year-old Pakistani guys turning up with a young white girl at the age of 14, and she's pregnant, and no one thought there might be something a bit dodgy going on.
No, but behind that, obviously, there are terminations, there are sexually transmitted disease. So somebody's dealing with that, right? Yeah. And the person or people who are dealing with that are involved. Yeah. We've already had situations where, which have been reported, where police were taking part. Yeah. We've had situations where care workers attended the weddings of the victim.
To a man 3 times her age or something, yeah. Exactly.
So this is why I think it won't come out. But just think about it. For child abuse to continue for decades, these people are not just turning a blind eye. Yeah. Certain people in all of those institutions are involved.
Well, they're enabling. They're enabling effectively, aren't they? Yeah.
More than that. They're involved. They're taking part. Yeah. And it can't enabling at the lowest end. Yeah. So this narrative of turning a blind eye is all whispered.
We're giving them too much credit. But also, I mean, again, we know. I mean, there have been scandals in numerous care homes about the sexual abuse by those working in the care home. So why would they be bothered about the girls being picked up by a bloke twice their age, and taken away to be gang raped somewhere else?
Exactly. And actually, sometimes when the children are going to these institutions to report, they're then taken to, let's say, another institution where they are raped and abused again.
Yeah. Oh, God. It's so... it's just so heartbreaking and incomprehensible to anyone, let's face it, anyone normal and moral.
Honestly, I had to tell my wife to stop talking about it because it shakes shakes you to your core, and she's right. She's involved. She knows
what's going on,
and it's massively frustrating. And that's why I don't think anything will come out. That's my opinion.
You don't trust it because there's just too many important institutions and important people who are involved and implicated. Yeah. And basically, if you pick out one brick, the whole thing falls down.
The whole of society will collapse. I honestly believe that because
it's so endemic.
The extent of it, God help us.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. When you go back to Jimmy Savile, everyone at BBC Senior knew, police knew, the government knew, everyone knew. I spoke to nurses who worked at some of the hospitals where he would go in and he had a key to the wall, to the hospital, and he could just walk around the walls and sexually abuse the kids. And they knew, and they were telling management he's sexually abusing, victims on the wards, and they were told, well, just pretend to be asleep so he doesn't attack them. I mean, literally, they knew. And if you're going to allow that, then... Oh, Jack, this is going to be a hard day, isn't it? Jack, really appreciate, not your real name, really appreciate you talking about that. Thank you so much. If your wife would ever like to call in, really like to hear from her too. 10:37 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:38 is the time. Let's speak to my next guest, former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Very good morning to you, Trevor.
Good morning, Julia.
I would have come to you a bit sooner, but we had just two extraordinary calls then. I'm sure you were listening, particularly, I think, to what Jack was saying. I say not his real name, about his wife having cancelled abuse victims, and his belief that, you know, he's not going to trust in this grooming gangs inquiry in terms of what it's going to bring up, because so many institutions are involved, so many important people at so many levels, and not just turning a blind eye, but actually involved. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought their testimony was very impressive and persuasive, Julia, and I'm sure you did too. And so will those who have watched this over many, many years and seen nothing done, in fact, quite the reverse, as they've described and as you've interjected, that it's actually going on as we speak, and very little is being done to curb it. But, I mean, if you take what Baroness Longfield has said at face value, which is that this will be a 3-year inquiry, and that at every stage of the process, a report will be issued, and it will be it will cover the details of the evidence that's been given so far, that it will not flinch from dealing with the ethnicity, culture, and religion of some of the people involved, and that it will be going back as far as 1996 rather than 2000, which is a full 30-year period of investigation. Now, the big thing is that we've heard all this before, and although she sounds very impressive, the proof will be in the pudding. And the culture and religion issue is absolutely pivotal here.
Yeah. That was the reason. People say, you always get this fight back, you know, from the left saying, oh, you know, the majority of sexual abuse in this country is committed by white men. Yes, we know that because the majority of the country is white. The point is, when they are found, unless they're Jimmy Savile, they are then investigated and charged. They're not deliberate. It's not covered up. It's not a blind eye isn't turned to it. And it's the ethnicity and those who were targeted and those who were perpetrators and the religion. That was the reason why it was able and is able to continue for so long.
The number of people who are involved in such crimes, not necessarily these crimes, but the white population, the white majority, are individuals. This is systematic and coordinated, and it is part of a gang, a huge gang, which effectively is covered by the words mostly Pakistani heritage.
Yeah.
And unless you address that directly, and I think on the face of it, as I say, Baroness Longfield seems to be suggesting that she will, we will never be able to get to the bottom of this and put it right. And what we need to accept is that the particular culture and religion of the people involved here is anathema to the vast and overwhelming majority of the culture and religion of the British people.
Yeah.
And until that clash is resolved, we might as well not bother, because too many people, as Jack and the other caller said, at the very center of all of this, in the judiciary, the police, and in politics, are up to their necks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really interesting that, you know, the idea was, and it's come out in court, it's not us saying this, the perpetrators themselves basically saying the white girls, they were easy prey, they were more likely to be in care, they were available, no one cared, the police didn't care about them. You know, Muslim girls weren't available, they're not allowed on the streets, you know, they're very, you know, they're at home with their families, very protective. Interestingly, there were early, 20, 30 years ago, early grooming gangs targeting Sikh girls. The Sikh local community leaders were having none of it, and basically there was a very clear, you know, physical threat from Sikh groups. Don't come for our girls because we'll come for you. And, you know, this is what's been played out on our streets for the last 20, 30 years, and it's absolutely terrifying. But no one looked after the white girls. No one should have to look after any girls in these scenarios. Keir Starmer's done a lot of damage to himself, though, hasn't he? Because, I mean, back in only January last year, he was saying that anyone calling for a national public inquiry, a statutory one with, as Anne Longfield, the chair, will have the rights to basically require people to give evidence, to evidence under oath. He was calling that jumping on a far-right bandwagon. only in June, after that rapid review by Louise Casey, who basically just looked at it and went, yeah, you need to have a national public inquiry. I mean, it was quite obvious to anyone who paid any attention. Did he agree to it? Even last December, only then we finally had a chair. He has dragged his feet over this something rotten. And let's face it, he's pretty desperate for this report to come out after the next election, isn't he?
No, absolutely. This is still being kicked into the long grass, but it will haunt him and his legacy, if you can call what his career has been worth a legacy at all.
I'd love to know, what is his legacy?
And what he said in that particular interview was unforgivable and inexcusable. And it was a Labour MP, a woman MP, who stood up in Parliament and actually described some of the atrocities inflicted upon these underage girls, which make the eyes water. I mean, it's shocking. It really is, brings you to tears to think of these poor girls who had no recourse to help or justice or any assistance whatsoever from the authorities who are supposed to help them. And really, they should be bringing in laws which forbids men to be involved in the care and looking after the girls who are in
that is interesting. Except, of course, there are lots of female staff who also, it turns out, basically turned a blind eye as well. Let's talk about something else as well. Let's talk about Starmer issuing this 48-hour ultimatum to doctors planning to go on strike for the 15th time. Again, these are the strikes that the Tory government were responsible for. It was all solved when Wes Streeting became Health Secretary in July 2024. And of course, they did a massive big payoff to the doctors, 29% over a few years. And now they've come back, twice now for more. They've been offered 7%. Not a bad pay rise given the current state of inflation at 3%. And basically they're saying no. But Keir Starmer's issued a 48-hour ultimatum saying the deal will be off, including 1,000 of the 4,000 training places for new doctors that's on offer as well. I mean, this is an insane ultimatum, isn't it, given that we're the ones who want those extra doctors?
Well, of course it is. And, it was the original offer or deal that was put together by Wes Streeting with these these doctors who are holding the Labour government to ransom as one of the leading trade unions, which has led to the constant resurgence of absurd pay demands by the medical fraternity. And it will carry on as long as Labour is in power, because they literally cannot stand firm against demands from the trade union movement, which is their paymaster.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so obvious, isn't it? And again, we are talking about a union that is no longer representing a professional group of highly respected members of society and a trade body. It is now basically, I mean, like the National Education Union. We've seen with them, basically, in their provisions, they're anti-reform, they're anti-Tory, they're a political movement to all intents and purposes, aren't they?
They're anti-Britain.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about also the thought police. We're told the thought police are going to stop wasting time on non-crime hate incidents. It's a new move from Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. Two former Tory Home Secretaries have ordered this before. It hasn't happened. But looking into the detail of it, it's not getting rid of non-crime hate incidents, which is what we were told it would be. It's not scrapping them at all. It basically limits the crimes that police can look into, but it still gives them pretty much their own discretion on whether or not they think an incident is something they need to record, or an incident is something that could lead to another crime. So, yet again, we're being told an absolute lie about getting rid of thought crime, aren't we?
We are, and thank goodness for talk radio and for you and the free speech media generally, because without them, we wouldn't know about these unless we had the probes through freedom of speech and access to the sort of information that was for a long time covered up. We wouldn't know about the sort of people that are the sort of alleged crimes. This should never have been put on the statute book in the first place.
Well, I don't think it was. That's the thing. They're not. It was something that was made up by the College of Policing. And then for some reason, the College of Policing is not under the auspices of people who pay their wages, us and the Home Secretary, and they just can do what they want. And they can just record these non-crime hate incidents against people. 60 a day, by the way. 60 a day go on.
Well, I mean, look, the police are simply tied up with this nonsense, which is entirely subjective anyway. It's all in the eye of the beholder, as indeed allegations of racism and sexism are. You don't need to be the subject or the object of that allegation for someone to simply say, I object, and then everything falls to pieces or comes to a standstill.
And then 10 years later, you apply for a job and you do your enhanced criminal record check, and then you can't get a job because you've been accused of racism by some random person in the street who heard you say something factual about migrant crime or something, and there you are. You can't get a job.
And that's if you haven't actually gone to prison already for saying what you've said.
Yeah, indeed, fair point. We live in a terrifying world, Trevor Kavanagh. Thank you very much. And indeed, ties in with the story of the front page of the Sun last week about break-in Britain, that only 1 in 12 burglaries are actually solved by the police, which tells you, I mean, you know, not spending their time on the stuff we do care about. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of the Sun, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate that. Tom Slater, just a quick word to you on that final topic.
No, it's the warped priorities, isn't it? North of 90% of burglaries not going unpunished, where it seems like almost 200% of misgenderings go punished in this country at the moment, and it's been like that for quite some time.
Yeah, it really is bizarre, isn't it? Going to take a quick break, then we're going to be talking more about Scott Mills, the BBC star who has been summarily sacked over his personal conduct. But what do we actually know whether what he has done or not done? And should people lose their jobs when they haven't even actually been charged with a crime? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's 10:52. Let's turn our attention to the latest BBC scandal. I mean, another week, another scandal, apparently. This is the summary sacking of Scott Mills. If you don't know him, he's a huge big host. He was on the BBC Radio 1. He's now currently the host of the BBC Radio 2 breakfast show, biggest BBC show, biggest radio show in the country. And he's been sacked over revelation that he was probed by police back in 2016 over what the police called serious sex offences against a teenage boy. Well, is there any coincidence that he was removed from his show on the day of that Hugh Edwards docudrama on Channel 5 exposing what he had been up to? Or is it also a coincidence that Tim Davie, the Director General, is leaving this week? Is this about the Prime Minister... What am I saying, Prime Minister? The Director General wanting to basically, clear the boards as he leaves. Let's talk about this with former BBC executive Roger Bolton. A very good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Now, yesterday it emerged that Scott Mills had been sacked, and we were told over personal conduct in the statement by the BBC. Later, we have been told that it's about a relationship, a historic relationship, according to reports, dating back a decade to his time when he was on Radio 1. Met police spokesman said in December 2016, the Met began an investigation following a referral from another police force. The investigation related to allegations of serious sexual offences against a teenage boy. These were were reported to have taken place between 1997 and 2000. And they say that a man in his 40s, obviously expect this to be Scott Mills, questioned by police under caution in 2018. And basically, the CPS determined the evidential threshold had not been met to bring charges, and the investigation was closed in May 2019. Do we know if this is the only allegation against Scott Mills that has led to his sacking, or is there something else? Because he hasn't been, let alone convicted, hasn't even been charged with the crime.
Yes, it's mysterious because we're dealing with events between 25 and 30 years ago, I think probably before Scott Mills worked for the BBC. So this isn't a case of what's happened to the BBC. The BBC investigates and they find things out. This is something that seems to predate his involvement. I suppose, and we're all guessing because we don't know, because Scott is unobtainable at the moment. And the big surprise, well, there are two surprises about this, I think. One is that the BBC has acted so quickly, and that may mean, maybe because it didn't act quickly before and is keen to get these things sorted out and so on. The other thing is the silence of Scott and his agent. The net result is terrible for everybody involved because we're all speculating. It's all on the front pages and we don't know what the facts are. I mean, there are a number of options, it seems to me. One is probably the most likely that Scott did not divulge to the BBC that he'd been investigated, and this, the BBC may see as part of its contract that should have happened.
And it may, I think in terms of a lot of these contracts, you would have to divulge it, especially if the investigation was ongoing at that time when you first started work.
So but they must be, the legal department of the BBC must be pretty sure they've got reasonable grounds for their actions. But of course, it doesn't mean that he's guilty. I mean, I think we've got to think back to the late 90s. It was difficult to be a young gay man then. He moved in society. He's talked to himself honestly about his trouble with alcohol and some drugs. He has said in the past he'd had suicidal tendencies.
But he'd lost a long-term partner, and after his partner died, he said he basically was drinking 2 bottles of wine.
So it was a very bad state.
Yeah.
The sadness, and there's a genuine sadness here. Everybody I know talks to him, says he's a really decent guy, nice guy. He's probably at the peak of his career. He seems very happy. He got married a couple of years ago. And suddenly all this is coming crashing down. What I don't quite understand is, why there hasn't been a statement put out.
Yeah, that's not good PR. We understand he is consulting lawyers, but again, he's known since Tuesday when he was pulled off air. He left his show, CLC, all on Wednesday, and some point on Tuesday this happened. And we understand this is after this now man who claims to be the victim of these serious sexual offences, as described by the police, that he went to the BBC, or we assume, or went to the Mirror. It looks like this was a Mirror exclusive, and said, "Look, what's happened? What's in this Hugh Edwards docudrama? This is what happened to me." Now that's the case. In which case,
I don't think that can be the case. Sorry, forgive me.
That's what I've been told in the business.
In Hugh Edwards' case, it's a man very powerful in his office and so on, and evidently exchanging pornography and also doing sexual acts with the man.
But apparently this was something that it was it was the trigger for him to come forward.
It could have been the trigger, but we shouldn't assume that it's a similar offence. It could have been the trigger, but again, we've got to presume innocence until this is what troubles me. If there isn't enough evidence to prosecute, I mean, you can be very careful.
That said, evidence to prosecute to take away someone's liberty is very different from evidence for perhaps someone losing their job. And what would have been judged as evidence in 2018, perhaps rather different from what would be judged as evidence now, because
we are talking about the events in the 1990s. So
yes, but it was interviewed under caution. It was interviewed in 2018. But this is the thing: is there a problem with the BBC where it either fails to act for years on end when things are open secret within the BBC, like Hugh Edwards' grooming of men, by the way, working at the BBC, and other allegations, Jimmy Savile, and all of that, and then you have the sexual, other men who are currently facing rape allegations and through the courts. And then when there is something else, they jump on it to try and save their reputation. And actually, they're either acting way too slowly by years, or they're overreacting, and they never seem to get it quite right.
Well, that would be your perspective. I think it's absolutely clear that the BBC has been determined to act quickly, and the chairman made a statement after the Hugh Edwards affair and elsewhere. The DG, the outgoing DG, said we're going to act very quickly. So I think there's a determination to do that. Of course, the danger is if you act too quickly and you don't have all the information, then you're putting the reputation of the BBC before the welfare of the individual. Yeah. So these are very difficult balancing acts. I mean, I agree with you, the BBC was too slow in the past, though we can disagree about how much they knew. I hope this isn't the case of the BBC being too hasty. Yeah. But the problem with not putting out, and I know why people don't want to put out statements.
But you leave all the speculation, and then people think the worst. Roger Bolton, I think this is very rare. I think we've actually agreed with each other. This is very unusual for you and me. Former BBC, you had to be right sometime. I know, we've taken his mic off. That's very cruel. Roger Bolton, we'll speak to you again soon. Former BBC executive Roger Bolton. Again, I'd love, there are always two sides to a story. We'll talk about lots more topics coming up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. We are fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock, and whether you're listening on DAB Plus Radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, great to have you on board, whether you're at work, at home, in the car, whether you're just escaping the kids during the Easter holidays. Good luck, everybody. Come here. Come. We are just a nice, warm hug of quiet sanity. Shut the door. The kids will be fine. Unless they're very young. Don't do that. I'm not giving you that sort of advice. So much to talk about. And look, whether you miss anything of the show, you go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. On the show coming up, we're going to be talking, obviously, more about the grooming gang scandal. We have this morning at 9:30 had the terms of reference, the length of time, the budget and all of that published on the grooming gang scandal. We'll give you more detail on that in a moment. Lots of you getting in touch about that. We'll give out the numbers in a moment. More on that crisis at the BBC for the Radio 2 host Scott Mills, sacked over his personal conduct, we're told. Well, I mean, does it involve this allegation that was made against him in the mid-90s that he was never charged over, certainly never convicted over, and also the non-crime hate incidents, which we're told have been scrapped in a win for freedom of speech. Have they been scrapped? And is it the win that we're going to think it is? Or have we still left far too much discretion to individual police forces to basically carry on policing our thoughts? Plus, Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is finding that not so easy for that rapprochement with the French officials resisting her demand for basically payment upon results in terms of stopping those migrant boats, as opposed to we'll just hand over a big wad of taxpayers' cash while you lot all smoke your jettains and take another 3-hour lunch break. Let it go. Anyway, lots to talk about. I'm delighted to say that joining me for the show today is editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Morning.
Morning.
Once again to you. I'll put to you the question I'm putting to our audience. We'll get to all the detail in just a moment. The National Inquiry into Grooming Gangs finally starting work. They're going to start getting evidence and getting their act together basically in the next month. The chair has issued the full scope of the inquiry, and she says it will not flinch from uncomfortable truths that basically have been ignored before. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call. The number to call is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. You can also you can send us a WhatsApp message if you want. Calls are charged at national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Tom, just to update people just tuning in, the chair of the grooming gangs is Baroness Anne Longfield, appointed in December. By the way, just under a year after the Prime Minister said in 2025 that anyone who wanted a full public inquiry across the nation into the grooming gangs was just jumping on a far-right bandwagon. And then in June, he jumped on the far-right bandwagon after Baroness Casey did a rapid review and said, yeah, this needs to be a national statutory public inquiry. And so that is what is happening. But again, still starting now. It's going to conclude in March 2029, we are told, but there are going to be interim reports. Now, it's got a budget March 2028. It's got a budget of £65 million, and so we're not going to see the final report until 2029, but there are going to be individual reports into individual towns and cities. They'll be confirmed along the way with budgets of £5 million. Crucially, it will focus on sexual exploitation by grooming gangs, not other forms of sexual abuse like individual or institutional abuse. So this is the stuff that victims and survivors were speaking out about. Like, it can't just be watered down. It needs to be about the specifics of the grooming gangs, why certain men targeted certain girls, and why every institution turned their backs on them. And crucially, they are going to look at institutions like the police, local authorities, care authorities, why they failed to protect children, and also crucially, in the words of the Baroness, the ethnicity, culture or religion of either perpetrators or victims, and whether that influenced patterns of offending and whether these factors shaped the institutional response. Crucially, she says, these are questions that previous reviews chose not to address. This inquiry will not avoid them. She said children across England and Wales were and still are sexually abused and exploited by grooming gangs, raped, trafficked, threatened into silence. This is not disputed, she says. What has been disputed, what has been minimised, explained away or buried for far too long is why the institutions that exist to protect them so often chose not to act. She says that they will not flinch from uncomfortable truths. Tom Slater, you've been covering this. You've spoken out about a lot of this. A lot of great work at Spiked on this. Do you trust that they will not flinch from uncomfortable truths? Do you think we will get to the bottom of this?
Well, it's time for action now rather than words. I mean, a lot of what you read out there is very encouraging. A lot of the details here are quite encouraging, looking at the ethnicity and religious question, not just in relation to the cover-up, but also in relation to the abuse. Are there kind of cultural factors which actually drove the perpetrators, not just influenced people desperate to pretend that it wasn't happening? But the proof will be in the pudding over the course of the next few years. I mean, this is an inquiry which was very hard fought for. Even then, there were attempts to kind of dilute its terms of reference in precisely the way
Jess
that you've been
Phillips, the Home Office Minister in charge of safeguarding girls and women, apparently quite happy to dilute, knowing that, and again, we've had people say, oh, we didn't need a national inquiry because we had the Alexis J inquiry, which I think had, it had about 6 hours of hearings or something on...
Exactly, and never really properly looking at this issue in the scale that it needs to, the nationwide aspect that needs to happen, and also, you know, people who were involved in advising the inquiry who seemed to think the whole thing was a far right dog whistle. All of that hopefully now has been cleared out, and we can see if this is, to be honest, unlike many. The thing that hopefully we're now, this sounds like a strange thing to say, inquiries often fail to deliver justice anyway. They can become a talking shop. It becomes
also 10 years on.
Displacement activity. But in a sense, it's been people having to fight tooth and nail just to get that. So we'll see what happens now. But one thing that I think is positive is that it's clearly had to respond to the level of public scrutiny, criticism from survivors, and this issue is not going away. Yeah. So even if the intention was to quietly park this, let this work go on in the background, and then a report will be published, but they'll say lessons will be learned and nothing really happens. I don't think the public will allow that to happen.
I think we're done. Yeah, I think we're done with all that nonsense. But it is crucial that she says they're going to publish reports along the way, and they're going to be sharing stuff with the NCA that investigates, serious organised crime, so that ongoing investigations can go on. But also, crucially, we are now seeing, and we have been seeing for the last, I suppose, like 5 or so years, the prosecutions are moving up onto a grand scale of the men perpetrating these crimes. But what we really need to see is prosecutions of those who enabled, turned a blind eye, or as one of our callers, a couple of our callers actually pointing out they didn't trust this. But we spoke to one caller, Jack, not his real name, his wife works in sort of child protection, and just saying he believes that the institutions didn't just turn a blind eye, they were involved. Too many police officers, judges, and others. And we saw this again, I know the VIP, Westminster scandal turned out to be a load of, a figment of imagination, a load of nonsense. But we do know, the likes of Cyril Smith, we know the likes of Jimmy Savile, MPs and people with knighthoods. We know there is abuse at a high level. We know this. The amount of victims who've come forward talking about how it's police officers, it's judges, it's people who work in care homes, it's local councillors. That's why it was all covered up. The thing that blows me away, and I like to think for our entire audience as well, is just how many people are doing this stuff. I suppose when I was a kid, you thought, okay, there was some, there's the local pervert. Everyone's got to keep away from him. Don't go near him. He's a bit dodgy. He flashed his kids. Or was it all just covered up? We just didn't know. I'm assuming that is what was happening in the 70s when I was growing up, that people just didn't know. And now at least we know people are talking about it, and that's got to be a good thing. But the scale of child abuse in this country and elsewhere is terrifying, and we know it's now being amplified by the internet and men who are just looking at, and women who were just looking at porn that I would have seen in the as a youngster, or the stuff that I would have thought was normal. Let's say normal is now stuff they wouldn't even it's not even available anymore. The stuff they're seeing is getting younger and younger and younger and more violent. I'm genuinely scared. This is just, it's almost the norm for some people. It seems to be the norm in some families and some communities. Well,
that's the thing, isn't it? And I think in a way that's why it was so important that this inquiry focused specifically on the issue of grooming gangs, the rape gangs, group-based sexual exploitation, as they call it in the jargon, because there are clearly very distinct issues here. One of which is, for instance, child abuse, as it goes on more broadly in British society at the margins, it tends to be kind of lone actors more broadly. You do see more people kind of connecting.
Grooming online, one-on-one,
grooming online,
or family members.
Exactly. So that's that's what we're sort of accustomed to. One of the more chilling aspects of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs phenomenon is that this is the abuse is intergenerational. Yeah. The perpetrators are intergenerational. Families. It's like
brothers and cousins and fathers and sons raping the same girl. I mean, it's so beyond our comprehension.
Which also obviously informs the scale of what they're able to get up to, particularly in the context of cowardly and depraved local authorities and police forces who are looking the other way. So that's why I think it was so important that particularly the grooming gang survivors who were originally advising the inquiry and then left en masse, making the point that if you try and make this about all forms of child abuse, the specifics here will be lost. And we all know why they were trying to broaden those definitions, because it allowed them to avoid precisely the sensitive cultural issues that were implied in this.
Yes, I've got no sensitive cultural issue, but I imagine if you are being drugged and gang raped, I don't think you're really bothered whether he's called Mohammed or Billy. I really think that's not going to be your main concern. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, look, we know also there's a really big push from Labour. They know perfectly well in the majority of these cases where it's men of Pakistani heritage, they are living in towns and cities which are largely got, and certainly at the time when this was at its peak, we don't know whether we don't know if it's peaking now. It's always been denied in London. Sadiq Khan, the London man, insists it's not happening in London. I find that unlikely at best that it's not happening in London. But a lot of these are Labour-run. They're Labour-run councils. They're the sort of places where, you know, you put anyone in a red rosette, they are going to win. Tories haven't got to look in for years. Lib Dems never look in for years. And so you're looking at sort of institutional, you know, party-based, you know, protection of perpetrators and those who've protected the perpetrators and turned a blind eye, all taken part. And that becomes even more of a problem because it becomes party political then. Yeah. That said, Tories were in power for a heck of a long time and did sod all about this. No,
I think that's fair. I think that's where you see the blame most clearly apportioned, because this has been going on for many decades now in predominantly Labour-run areas, and
but not solely.
Even in the rare situations in which you had a Labour MP like Anne Cryer from Keighley, we've spoken about Sarah Champion, who was kicked out of the shadow cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn for daring to raise this issue. They're immediately squashed, and we all know why that is. I mean, it's a general political correctness of the Labour Party, to put it lightly, and also fears of electoral backlash if they were seen to be going after a certain type of paedophile too vigorously, which is a horrific state of affairs. The Tories, on the other hand, this scandal, if you think about when it really came to public prominence, Andrew Norfolk's reporting in The Times in 2011, all of this is post-David Cameron coming to power. It's one of many, many things that they didn't do in that fabled 14 years in government, despite periodically making a stern-faced speech about it.
Don't express concern. Don't you dare wring your hands about it or make a speech about it if you're not going to do anything about it. Because, this is my point. Right now, there are girls right now being gang raped above a kebab shop somewhere in a town in England. Right, there are girls being gang raped right now, and no one is helping them. That's sorry, but that needs to be stopped. It's just that simple. This isn't about righting the wrongs from the past. This is about preventing it now. It's getting justice. It's making sure that all of the people who committed those crimes go behind bars. We're never going to see all of them, but the people who turned a blind eye, who didn't do their job. You have a statutory duty to protect children, and you don't do it. I don't want you just losing your job. I don't even want you losing your pension. I want you to be punished.
Yeah. And incidentally, I think it's interesting that when you actually saw the Tories start to make some moves on this front, it was at sort of the tail end of the Rishi Sunak time. I think Suella Braverman was still in post, at least at that point. They set up one of these task forces which was very much aimed at getting arrests, and those arrests have numbered in the thousands now.
They really did.
And isn't that kind of telling that it probably, and this is not to overload them with praise because they should have been doing this beforehand, but maybe it took politicians who were willing to take the brickbats, who weren't so easy to caricature as racist, for them to do anything about it. But
here's the thing, again, if it was that easy to ramp it up, then it could have been ramped up 10 years earlier, when, by the way, that evidence would have been easier to get. But also, crucially, I mean, you know, it is extraordinary that for every institution it's taken so long to face up to this, and it blows my mind. I'll never stop saying this. I do not understand anybody who puts their career or the reputation of their institution above stopping a child getting raped. I don't. You're a strange sort of person. I understand when people put their own safety. You know, there were girls who basically, you know, they basically wanted to protect their own sisters from getting raped. They were the next in the line. You know, that's different. I'm talking about, you're worried about your job. You're worried about your job more than you're worried about a child being raped. You need to get a look at your head. You really, really do, because we have got to stop this awful. I was going to say nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's an abomination of a crime. I want to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Frankly, when we're talking about this, I sort of feel a bit wrong talking about anything else. Let's briefly touch on Scott Mills, the Radio 2 host at BBC. Look, a lot of people who don't listen to the BBC, very wise souls, wouldn't have a clue who he is. But you know, it's the biggest radio breakfast show. Whoever presents it, that's the deal. Yeah. Radio 2 is the biggest breakfast show. He's also a Eurovision commentator who won Race Around the World. Love that show. Came across very well in it, I thought, actually. But, you know, and we're told by Roger Bolton, from the former BBC exec, he's very liked. He's, you know, he's not someone people there have been rumours about. But he's been sacked over a revelation. He was probed by police in 2016 over serious sexual offences against a teenage boy. It's not coincidental that Hugh Edwards' docudrama was on television, back on the front page of The Sun this week. Everyone talking about Hugh Edwards and what he did, and sat by the BBC after. By the way, suspended on full pay, even getting a pay rise while he was under investigation for having child porn. I mean, hello. And also the same week that Tim Davie leaves as Director General finally, after the scandal over that Trump Panorama documentary. Are they just basically trying to clean up quick sweep broom across the kitchen to try and clean things up before the new Director General? Have they acted too fast, or is there more to this that we don't know? Because teenage boy, do they mean a 16-year-old? Do they mean a 14-year-old? Do they mean a 19-year-old? Apparently his allegations were over a 3-year period. He was not charged by the police in 2018. He has not been convicted of a crime. I do always worry where we talk about cases where it's one person's. Are there other people coming forward saying the same thing when it's just one person's allegation? I'm not saying we shouldn't listen to victims, but they're alleged victims, they're alleged suspects, and I really do think that we need to have people innocent until proven guilty.
No, absolutely. And that, I thought, was the lesson of the sort of post-Savile moment, where, because this is a really good example of it, you have someone like Savile, who clearly a blind eye was turned to within the BBC and in other institutions for many, many years. And then in response to that, rather than trying to work out, OK, how do we make sure we take these allegations more seriously next time? How do we make sure the justice is done? You get this sort of overcorrection in the other direction where, any allegation which is made, regardless of who it's coming from, how specious, how much, credibility could be lent to it, instantly leads to sackings, people's names being dragged through the mud, criminal investigations, even, as we saw, on the basis of, in some cases, fantasists making allegations. So you're in this situation now where it's really difficult to tell, is the BBC doing the first thing or the second thing? Is it turning a blind eye, as it had done in other cases, or is it overcorrecting because of Hugh Edwards, because of Savile, because of other instances where they had been seen to act far too slowly and to the detriment of genuine victims? But like you, I think this is why due process and the presumption of innocence, not purely as a legal matter, but almost just something that we all try to uphold when you're talking about people and their reputations and their jobs, is so important. Because until we know more than the scraps of information that are presented in the newspapers today, it's impossible to work out whether this is the right decision.
And again, Roger Baldwin from the BBC, formerly of the BBC, makes the point, wise to put out a statement. We've heard nothing from Scott Mills. Let's talk about the thought police. These are the non-crime hate incidents we hear so much about. Free Speech Union exposing some 60 a day over the last few years of people being accused basically by someone whose subjective view is that they have been transphobic, racist, sexist, homophobic, or whatever it is, that it's a hate crime. Literally words, something that someone has put on social media or something someone has said in the street, a misheard comment, a joke, even a former Home Office Minister, Home Secretary, I think, being accused of one by someone who never even heard the speech. I mean, we're talking about madness territory. Something invented by the College of Policing, not, I believe, statutory in the system. It's by definition not a crime. Therefore, by the way, none of the business of the police, and yet they're being recorded on people's records. People are unable to get jobs working with children if they need an enhanced DBS check, a criminal records check. We're told now by the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, they're being ordered to stop wasting time on online squabbles, and their headline I saw yesterday was they were going to be scrapped. But they've not been scrapped, have they?
No, this was always the fear, was that what you'd end up with is a sort of rebranding, a sort of quiet shuffling of how in which these things are recorded, maybe an attempt to limit them in some aspects, but the practice sort of limps on. Because this is the issue, is that the practice of recording and essentially going looking for non-crime hate incidents is one that has just bubbled up from within the police itself. They claim that it's a legacy of the Stephen Lawrence inquiry, where in that report there was this suggestion that hate incidents, as they were called, race hate incidents, would be recorded, so that the idea being that you'd have this kind of intelligence within the community. These things are arising. But
also you would deter actual physical acts of abuse.
Yeah, and you knew what was going on.
Because you'd already tackled people's words.
And it kind of makes some sort of sense. If there's a lot of racist graffiti going up in there, you think this might kick off at some point. But then you find out what they're actually recording, and it's kids calling each other names on the playground. It's someone whistling Bob the Builder at their Polish neighbour. Never fully understood that one.
Can I just say, I always thought that was funny.
It was quite amusing.
I imagine you'd get quite irritating if it was done every day, though.
There was one guy who got, he was speaking Russian, and he got what he felt was an overly aggressive haircut as a consequence, and that was logged as a non-crime hate incident. Do we really think that some sort of anti-Russian pogrom was going to kick off outside of that?
It's always been a load. It's always been a load of nonsense. But of course, we know, Julie Bindel, the feminist writing, a fantastic woman. She had a visit from the police because someone who claimed they were trans, they were offended by her online comments. Alison Pearson, of course, visited over an alleged offence of inciting racial hatred, which she initially believed was apparently a non-crime hate incident. They said, "Oh no, it's an actual crime." But again, that was thrown out, and she is currently suing the police over this. And the father, Ted creator Graham Linehan, of course, famously arrested by armed police at Heathrow last September over online comments, clearly jokes about trans activists. At that point, the Met said, "Right, we're done. We're no longer going to investigate these things." The trouble is, a lot of discretion is still being left, and that's what worries me, because I don't think we can trust the police with discretion. They've not been proven to be very good at showing sensible discretion so far.
But they don't know what they're doing either. I mean, I've written about a lot of these cases. I've interviewed a lot of people who've gone through this. Many of them ones that you just mentioned.
There's a very interesting documentary about it.
Think Before You Post, still on YouTube.
Yep.
The police have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea what does and doesn't count as a non-crime hate incident. The government
they literally don't know the law.
On the law, they'll, as in the case of Graham Linehan, originally they accused him of inciting violence, then they downgraded it to a non-crime.
He said you should kick trans women in the balls.
Yeah.
But that's because trans women, they claim they're women, in which case they wouldn't have testicles, will they?
No, exactly.
So that's the joke, people.
With them.
Yeah.
And then other cases of people, they will quote laws at them that don't actually exist. It's almost like they get offended first and sort of ask questions later.
Are they using ChatGPT? To decide things.
Look,
I want to move on, because we're going to be talking to a guest about that in a few minutes, but I also want to talk about Keir Starmer. He's called an emergency COBRA meeting today over the fuel and oil crisis relating to the Iran conflict. And by the way, after midday, we're going to be talking to a former senior advisor to the Crown Prince exiled Crown Prince of Iran. So that'll be very interesting, find out what he makes of the claims about how long this conflict's going to go on. But Keir Starmer is appealing to oil and banking executives to help Britain dealing with a 1970s style energy shock, warning the government can't do it on its own. He met with energy bosses and logistics bosses and everything yesterday. But I mean, come on, you can't say these people are the enemy and these people are the problem and then tax them to the hilt and then go, "Oh, would you mind helping?" I mean, we could help just by not having Ed Miliband in a job, and we actually produce the oil and the gas that we've got from the North Sea, which we're currently importing from Norway, which they're getting from the North Sea. And
of course, it's clear that when you have energy price shocks, that the energy company is going to do quite well at that in the short term. But that doesn't mean that they are ultimately responsible for the war that's just kicked off, or they're ultimately responsible for our own woeful self-harming energy policy. And I think this is part of Keir Starmer as well, is that he constantly kind of wants to shift the burden of sorting out problems onto either regulators or business. He doesn't have a lot of ideas himself. He kind of presents as being very collaborative, very interested in listening to people. But primarily,
he just doesn't got a clue.
He just doesn't know what he's doing.
Yeah,
I think that's probably more the case here.
And we see this on every single issue, don't we? It's genuinely terrifying. We'll be talking more about that later in the show as well. 11:26 is the time. We're going to take a break. Just to let you know, in half an hour's time, we're going to be talking to one of the victims of the Rotherham child grooming scandal. That's Sammy Woodhouse. She's going to be speaking out what she makes of the grooming gang in terms of reference. Up next, we're going to be taking your calls. 0344 499 1000. What is your reaction? Do you trust that this inquiry is going to actually get to the bottom of what happened, and we're actually going to basically see justice, not just the victims of those grooming gangs, but also they're victims of all the institutions that failed them again and again and again and again. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is sort of the home of common sense. So, it's just been given some information, actually, just relating to Scott Mills. We're discussing, he was questioned in 2018 by the Metropolitan Police. This is a Radio 2 presenter who's just been sacked over allegations of serious sexual offences against a teenage boy. The teenage boy, the BBC are reporting, was under 16, and at the time the man who was accused, Scott Mills, was in his 40s at the time. And these are about allegations reported to have happened between 1997 and 2000. This was first reported by the Mirror newspaper. So that perhaps may explain the actions of the BBC if you're talking about an underage child at that point and a man in his 40s. Again, no charges brought, no prosecution brought, which I do feel we do need to mention. But let's go to your calls. Martin is on the line in Nottingham. Martin, you're not your real name, and again, as will become apparent, the reason why many of our callers today don't want to give their real names, but you wanted to have your say on the grooming gangs. Do you think that this national inquiry is going to get to, the full truth?
It will be pushed past the next general election, Julia.
Yeah.
It will be a whitewash. They are terrified of any kind of backlash. A really good friend of mine is a top police officer in Birmingham, and he said the fear of a backlash is bigger than anything else now.
Yeah, because there is going to be one. Again, and it'll be a backlash against the police, against councils, again, Labour Party very much implicated. A lot of these councils were run by the Labour at the time. But you have a personal perspective as well on this, don't you?
Yeah, my niece was raped in Yorkshire by three men of that background, and
what when you say that background, what do you mean?
Well, the Pakistanis, basically. I didn't want to say it, but yeah, Pakistani.
Well, no, but that's the whole point. Even the inquiry is going to look into this. They've accepted there was a cultural aspect to this.
Yeah. It's just you're always on the back foot with these things, aren't you?
Not on this show, my darling. No, facts, because facts aren't racist.
No,
facts aren't homophobic or because there's homophobic or transphobic or because misogynist.
No, you're right.
Facts are facts.
And so it lasted nearly 7 hours.
Oh my God. How old was she?
She was. I'll try and work this out now. She was 12. She was 12
oh God.
She's now 22. She's a relatively happy, very clever young lady. But we can just tell it's not something that's ever going to go away.
And this was a one-off event.
It was the third time, but it was the third time she'd been told that her parents would be killed if it came to light, and that's why it lasted as long as it did. But was she groomed by them or dragged? Yeah, she was given presents and taken to places.
And they were paying her attention, and she thought one of them was her boyfriend. The usual.
And one of them said that they should have a life of luxury in the future because his dad owned an oil well in Kuwait and everything. And to cut a long story short, the first two weren't that bad, if you can possibly say it that way.
Yeah,
but the third time, and in the end, she thought she'd got nothing to lose, and she told her dad.
And thank God. Because so many of these girls didn't. But again, people will say, why don't you tell people? And they don't tell people because they're told, if you tell anybody, we're going to rape your sister as well, or we're going to burn down your house. And we know that girls were murdered. We know that people's homes were burnt down. It's a real threat.
It's horrible to talk about it, but I think we have to. And thank goodness we've got shows like yours, because you'd never hear this on the BBC, would you?
They've come to it quite late. We're always told we've come to it quite late, but I've had Maggie Oliver, we're going to speak to her on the show, big whistleblower in terms of the Manchester grooming gangs, and she and I were discussing it when I was on another radio station back in 2011, 2012. This is awful. It's such a long time. What happened after your niece told her dad?
It was very negative at first. Social workers weren't very helpful. It was, how much did you really, you went along with these trips out. How much of it is really your fault, and all this kind of thing.
12.
And in the end, they couldn't start. The smoke screens had to come down. And
did anyone get prosecuted?
I think there was somebody, but it was very sort of cloudy, and they didn't. I don't think they went to jail or anything. But before I let you go on to the next person, I'm absolutely convinced we've got two-tier police, two-tier judges now.
I agree.
And two-tier social workers. Even judges, I think, are two-tier now.
Yep. I completely agree with you. I really, really do. And I don't understand why they don't understand what damage they're doing to the fabric of our society and our democracy by doing that.
Yeah. One last thing. What do you think of this new thing? I know it's a fact. Quite often now you get judges on quotas. Can that possibly ever be right?
Oh, I didn't know about that. I'll look into it. No, absolutely not. Martin, not your real name. I really appreciate that. Apologies for calling to that phone line, but obviously wanted to get my 12-year-old. Well, you know, she must have contributed. You know, must have contributed. 12-year-old. I mean, that's just called rape. Just call it what it is. Barry is in Norwich. Wants to have his say. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Julia. Yeah, just like to say that I was in the care system from 1975 to 1987.
Yeah.
And I can tell you now that all this was going on way, way, way back then. Yeah. As a child, nothing happened to me, but years later I found out that, because I got access to my files, I found out that one of the people in charge of one of my children's homes was sent to prison for 9 years for the systematic rape of young girls in the children's home that I was in.
You know the bit that bothers me about that? 9 years.
Yeah, not enough. And, you know, never...
What was that? What was that? 2 hours for each rape?
Yeah, and these children, and I kept in contact with one of the girls that I was in care with. Yeah. And we've been friends from the age of 10 onwards. And some of the stories that she's told me it will make your blood boil. And this rape gang inquiries, and I call it rape gang, these are Muslim paedophile rape gangs, yeah? That's what they are. That's what they need to be called.
They're Pakistani specifically.
Yeah. But they are, I mean, these were so-called vulnerable girls. The majority of these girls are probably in the care system.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Or from broken homes.
Well, they know who to target. They know who to target.
They were white. And until this inquiry is going to be a cover-up, it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah, right? People have walked away from it already. Like you say, that ex-police officer Maggie Oliver, what an absolute diamond she is. Yeah. You know, until we start seeing people getting locked up and never coming out of prison again.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And this goes from the top. You've got police officers involved in this, social workers involved in this, counsellors involved in this, teachers, everybody at every level are involved in this. And until people are put in the dock and a judge sentences these people to life imprisonment, as far as I'm concerned, never to see the light of day again.
If you're a senior police officer and you knew about this, you didn't do anything, I want you going away for a good stretch. None of this suspended sentence nonsense. No, I couldn't agree with you more, Barry. I'm going to have to end this. I was always running horribly late, but so appreciate that call. And Martin's as well. Thank you. 11:37 is the time. Up next, going to talk to former police officer, founder of Fair Cop. That's Harry Miller. We're going to talk to him about those non-crime hate incidents. I'm sure he's got his tuppence he wants to give in on the grooming gangs inquiry too. That's up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:39 is the time. Let's go straight to Harry Miller. He's a former police officer, founder of Fair Cop, and joins us now. Harry, a very good morning to you. I want to talk to you about these non-crime hate incidents and whether they have been scrapped or not. I'm not entirely sure they have, but I do want to get your reaction to the grooming gangs inquiry. We've got those terms of reference. You've spoken out so many times as a former police officer about failures of the police. Do you trust this inquiry is going to get to the truth?
I trust it more now than I would have done a few years ago. I think the tide has turned, and I think it's turned in our favour. Much as I dislike Tony Blair and don't trust him at all, I thought it was quite encouraging to see him writing, I think it was in the Times last week, that Labour, his old party, need to stop their flirtation with Islam because it's dangerous. So I think the tide is turning, and for the victims of the rape gangs, something needs to happen. We need to have a full, honest and open inquiry, and we need to deal with each of these, whether it be a police officer, a counsellor, a social care worker, or whoever, or just simply a grooming gang member. We need to deal with them with the same degree of enthusiasm that the police would if this was a right-wing grooming gang.
Oh yes, that's
if it was a right-wing grooming gang crisis, the police and everybody, they would be all over it.
That's the truth.
Exactly. So if we're talking about policing and a justice system that operates without fear or favour, then let's see the same degree of openness, the same degree of investigative aggression, and the same degree of fearlessness as there would in that scenario.
Good luck with that, Harry. Good luck with that. I mean, again, I agree with you. I like to think the tide has turned and the public will accept nothing else. But again, we're not in charge of the actual decisions to prosecute and how much evidence there is, etc., etc. But that's the difficult bit. Again, because it's taken so long, but it's taken so long because of the cover-up. So we're in that bind. Let me ask you about something that we've got also announced today, and this is the announcement. And again, this is a very encouraging headline. One of the papers thought police are ordered to stop wasting time on online squabbles. And basically, we told that the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood announced his plan, said under reform she's bringing in, forces will no longer be policing perfectly legal tweets. Instead, they'll be doing what they do best, patrolling our streets, catching criminals and keeping communities safe. I mean, that's an interesting turnaround for the police, isn't it? Saying that the current system is not fit for purpose and new common sense rules. We're told this was the scrapping of non-crime hate incidents, but they've never been on the actual legislative books at all anyway, what with not being crimes. They were invented by the College of Policing back in, 2014. Two former Tory Home Secretaries have tried to get rid of these. Do you think these are gone, or do you fear, as I do, that actually they're going to continue to be used? We're just going to have slightly smaller scope for them, and that means we're leaving far too much to individual police officers and individual chief constables, and we're going to be stuck with the same problem of, let's face it, the thought police.
Yeah, well, as I'm not on your programme this morning wearing my party hat and jumping up and down with excitement about any of this. I think the real problem here is that, hurrah, we've got rid of gonorrhea, but we've replaced it with a clap. That's what's happened here, Julia. I'm afraid, and I say that in all seriousness, because what we have now is a thing called shadow crime reporting. So they've got rid of the so-called non-crime hate incidents. Yippee! We're now being recorded on the basis of no evidence whatsoever, on the basis of no investigation.
Fully subjective.
On the basis purely of the report of some motivated lunatic with a grievance. We are now being recorded as having committed a crime. The crime, we are then contributed to the crime statistics.
Well, hold on a minute, though, but non-crime hate incidents have to be disclosed in an enhanced criminal records check. But they're saying it will no longer be the case that they are recorded and have to be revealed in the records check, so they won't stop people getting jobs. So what do you talk about? This shadow crime, you're saying that we'll still have that on our records?
Yes, exactly. So they're no longer called non-crime hate incidents. This has been a masterclass of rebranding. What is happening now is that the police are recording people not as having committed a non-crime, which was a nonsense, but for having committed a crime. And this is the thing. This stems from the Home Office, where a crime is recorded against a person, against a named individual, on the balance of probability that a crime has been committed, but can only be removed if the chief constable personally gets involved and decides no crime has in fact taken place, which leads us to a position where we have shadow crime recordings. And that's the reason that I'm taking the Home Secretary and the Chief Constable of Lincolnshire to the High Court later this year for precisely this reason.
Well, fantastic to hear that. But this is the thing. I mean, we have these high-profile cases: the Father Ted creator, comedian, comedy writer Graham Linehan. We've had Alison Pearson. We've had Julie Bindel. And again, we think the police have been pretty much humiliated, especially when armed police turn up on a plane at Heathrow Airport to arrest Graham Linehan for some jokey tweets about trans-identified men in women's toilets, for goodness sake. But this thing, I mean, the reporting of this has been very much, oh, yay, non-crime hate incidents scrapped. How has everyone got it so wrong if they're still going to be there and we're still not going to be able to challenge them? Because if someone says, I heard Julia say this, or someone says, for instance, when I say, well, we've had a court case, complaints to Ofcom, Julian Morham and his bunch of reprobates at the Good Law Project, by the way, all funded by idiots who are paying a fortune to them in donations, complaining to Ofcom about conversations that people like me on air have had, saying that trans women are men. Now, a trans person can say, I consider that to be a transphobic hate crime. So what happens at that point?
Okay, so what happens at that point is that if it was you saying this, then more than likely that you would be recorded for a breach of Section 179 of the Online Safety Act for the crime of maliciously spreading knowingly false information. No, yes.
Malicious spreading of facts.
Yeah, exactly. The police will continue, I think, to weaponise the various...
No, but I've got that on my record.
Yes, absolutely.
And if I ever foolishly wanted to work with children, I never want to do that. That wouldn't be disclosed. But would I be told that it was on my record?
No, not necessarily at all. I only discovered that I had a crime recorded against me because I put in a data subject access request to my local force to discover if they had anything on me. I was absolutely stunned to discover that I'd been recorded for the crime of stalking. And the person that I was stalking was that police officer, Lindsay Watson, apparently. So I wouldn't have known about this. And I don't think, I think this is one of those long incubation period viruses. Because let's face it, non-crime hate incidents were around from 2014. Yeah. I blew the lid on it all in 2019. That's a long time. And I think the same thing is happening now with these shadow crime records.
But the police have no business getting involved. I mean, if someone says, we believe that's crime now, but the police should know, for instance, and we've seen a huge number of these cases involving trans accusations, completely subjective nonsense. And they say, well, I'm sorry, that's not a crime, that's freedom of speech. So toddle along, stop wasting police time, go be offended in your own bedroom. But don't waste our police time. But they don't. If they record that, but this is the thing. It is policing what people say. It's entirely subjective. But people don't have a right of reply. It's not like you've accepted a caution, or you've been found guilty in a court of law, or you've pleaded guilty in a court. This is just happening with you having no input. You may not even be interviewed about this, and you might have this on your record.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Mind-blowing.
The police have discovered a workaround from the judicial process, which is quite terrifying, and it's more typical of the Stasi than it is of the British police. So what they do, they record you. That is then added to the crime statistics, which when the government see that, they go, oh my goodness, look, the crime statistics have gone on. We need to give the police more powers. And so it is basically a circle, JERK, in order to promote the concept of hate crime. And that, of course, is done in order to suppress free speech. The police are not going to give this up, and the college are not going to give this up. This has been an expert rebranding, nothing more. They haven't got rid of thought policing, not one bit.
Absolutely extraordinary. I'm very pleased you put everyone right on that. There's Harry Miller, a former police officer and founder of Fair Cop. Thank you. Tom Slater, I mean, again, the headlines, it's all been... No, it's not gone. It's just going to be hidden from us.
Yes, I mean, the death of non-crime hate incidents has been declared before as well. The Tories tried to curtail it, never really happened. Now we're seeing Labour claiming that they're going to force the police to stop this from taking place. That clearly is coming a crop. But the issue is the culture within policing itself. This is not something
people at the top
which was imposed on them. This is not about them enforcing laws that other people wrote. This has happened because of the great awakening of the British Constabulary, which might sound strange, but it is very much true.
You can't get promoted unless you sign up to Manus. One of the reasons why a lot of ordinary coppers are trying to leave, because they just can't play along with the nonsense anymore. But again, as we know, they don't investigate crimes, actual crimes. They certainly don't catch any criminals, and they're spending their time dealing with this. It is utterly mind-blowing, this. Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, why Shabana Mahmood's not making much headway with her French counterpart over the rapprochement, over basically tacking those boat gangs coming across from France. She wants payment by results. They're not keen. I wonder why not. We'll talk about that with the former head of the UK Border Force. That's Tony Smith. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much for joining us. Just a quick bit of breaking news for you. Nigel Farage has just done a press conference at Heathrow Airport along with Robert Jenrick, and he's been talking about the grooming gangs inquiry. He says he doesn't believe he says he has no faith that the grooming gangs inquiry will give justice for victims. Absolutely no faith, he says. And we're talking more about that with Sammy Woodhouse, who's one of the victims of the grooming gangs, in the next half hour. Also, Reform have announced they are going to scrap air passenger duty if they get elected to make holidays cheaper for families. And that would be very welcome to a lot of people, would it not? Right now, well, let's talk about people who definitely don't pay air passenger duty because they're not on planes. And indeed, they're not paying any taxes at all because they're coming across on boats, just paying a sum to one of the many gangs who are providing those huge dinghies to get them across to the UK. They're supposed to be stopped by the French police. We pay them hundreds of millions of pounds a year to stop them. Seem to spend rather more time at lunch and smoking chitanes on the beach than actually doing that. And now the Home Secretary, on the final day that the latest deal is in place, it ends as of tomorrow morning, Shabana Mahmood is demanding for payment by results. And the French have said, inevitably, no. Let's talk about this with Tony Smith. He's former head of UK Border Force. Tony, I mean, what did we expect? Of course they're going to say no, the results aren't very good.
Yeah, I think Shabana Mahmood's absolutely right on this, Julia. I think she does need to negotiate a much better deal with the French than the one we've had so far. Fact is, we don't know what a stop means, really. Does that include an arrest? Does that include people that tried to get across and the engine failed? That includes dinghies that were found on the scattered back into the dunes. I mean, I'd like to know, what do we mean by a stop?
Well, that's it. We're told that they're stopping something like a third of boats, so it could be a hell of a lot worse than it is. That's what we're told.
Yeah, I know what we're being told, but I think we need much more transparency about that, Julia. I want to see a performance measurement framework. The French should be arresting these people. They're probably illegally in France anyway. There was part of this deal, Julia, that was supposed to build a detention centre in France where these people would be arrested, taken into a detention centre and processed by the French with a view for immigration enforcement out of France and deportation. That's not happened either. Yeah. That's been held up allegedly because of some planning issue. But I mean, the fact of the matter,
I'm glad they've got the same problems we've got. They can't get anything done either.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this is, it's basically that we're paying a lot of money, taxpayer money, for a service, and I don't know what the service is we're getting. I'm not saying we shouldn't be negotiating, Julia. I did a lot of negotiations with the French in my time, and actually I got on quite well with them operationally when we set up the juxtaposed controls and the our search zones in the border force over in Calais. It was pretty good, but this is political, and this is a fact of the matter is that I'm not sure that the French political will is there to actually give us the sort of transparency we need.
Well, because this is what I find fascinating, because this is a massive problem for the people who are living locally in Calais to have all of these migrants around. Exactly the same reason why we don't want them in our asylum hotels or houses of multiple occupancy here. But the stupid thing is, I think, on behalf of the French, is one of the main reasons why a lot of migrants are coming into France to go to Calais to try and get on boats to England is because they know that once they get to the UK, they're not going to be able to, they're not going to be deported. They know perfectly well they're going to stay here forever. Like 3 of them might get sent to Paris. They just come straight back. But if they were all basically stopped in the Channel, stopped from getting on the boats, or immediately returned to France as a safe country, they wouldn't bother not just coming to Britain. I think a lot of them wouldn't bother going to France in the first place. I think you could stop that trade within a month.
Yes, you're right, Julia. You're right. That's
why don't they think that then? Is it just because politically he doesn't want to seem to be weak? And I mean, let's face it, Macron's all part of the whole punish us for voting Brexit crowd, isn't he?
Well, Macron kicked the can up the road, if you remember, to the EU and say this is an EU matter. You're not in the EU anymore, therefore whatever. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that it wouldn't make an iota of difference if we're in the EU or not, because when we were in the EU, then they weren't taking anybody back then either.
Well, we're told, aren't we? I see one more message. Oh, we were in the Dublin Convention, we were able to return. But in fact, we made requests, but we only returned a few hundred. And in fact, we accepted, I mean, something like 10 times more than we actually returned.
Yeah, that's on the record, Julia, if anyone wants to look it up, but you're right. So they did, we never had a returns agreement when we were in the EU. The French have always played hardball with us on returns. They've not been bad on preventions of crossings. I mean, they did let us into Calais and Dunkirk. We did spend money, but we put fences around those ports to stop jumping in berthsides. We had our dog teams over there searching under the lorries. So they did do quite a bit.
But hold on, isn't the problem, though? I remember when, all the talk was about the people being found in the backs of lorries. And again, how dangerous that was. I mean, people, and sneaking in and getting in the back of people's, of cars even. I mean, really terrifying stuff. And clinging onto the bottom of the trains even. But basically, we stopped that. And so they moved on to the boats. And if you stop it in one different part of France, they move to the next place. Are you ever going to stop this if there isn't the pull of people wanting to come to a country where they'll get a free house and free food and lodging?
Not without a change of policy and government in France, Julia. That's what we need. And then the other thing, of course, is, well, if we can't control what the French do, what do we do? When you and I have spoken about this many times before. Oh, yes. But, we do need to see what we're going to do about people coming across the Channel. Are we still going to let them claim asylum, human rights, and get reason in the community, or should we get much tougher ourselves on immigration enforcement and deportation and removal? And I think we need to have that up there, in our back pocket, because that, I think, is the alternative solution. We can't stop them in France, and we've got to do something to detain people.
Exactly. Why are they coming here? There's the question. And we all know the answer. We know what needs to be done. No one's doing it. Tony Smith, you've always been the person talking sense on this, former head of the UK Border Force. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online with us. It is unbelievably frustrating, but you've got to laugh. I mean, on one level, Keir Starmer, it's all going to be so simple and easy. We're just going to go in. It's the Tories were the problem. They weren't having a nice chat over croissants with the French, and if only the Labour Party were in charge, it'd all be fine. And it's got worse.
It has gotten worse, and I think it's because there's a lack of recognition of the incentives here. Of course, when you have so many people in Calais and elsewhere, that France, if we're being brutally honest about it, are quite keen to get rid of, are they going to go out of their way?
They treat them pretty badly.
To bring those boats back. So clearly, of course, there's always room for doing deals with your near neighbours, with trying to work out if there are collective solutions to what are collective problems, of course. But ultimately, the buck does stop with the government itself. They were never going to be able to outsource this problem to the French, as the previous government tried to do as well. Yeah. And to turn around and be surprised that, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds later, we're still not in any better position after all that we've seen so far, just is ridiculous.
Not really a surprise, is it? Thank you very much indeed for that. Look, lots more top guests coming through the next hour of the show. I'm going to get a lot more of your calls, some extraordinary calls today. Thank you so much for getting in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We're going to talk about car finance scandal. We're going to be talking to Sammy Woodhouse, one of the victims who's spoken out so brilliantly about being a victim of the grooming scandal. Also up next, going to be talking to a former advisor to the Crown Prince, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, about what is going on in that conflict. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. This is Talk with the Home of Common Sense. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to the show. If you're just tuning in, if you've missed anything from the show, you can go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I know it's really easy to find. Hit subscribe. You never have to miss a thing. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is absolutely fantastic to have your company today. In just a couple of moments, we'll be speaking to a former advisor to the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, to chat about all the latest on the conflict. Also coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking more about the national inquiry into the grooming gangs. Basically, it's starting today. We've got those terms of inquiry. Extraordinary calls from you about this. An amazing number of you, have had some sort of involvement personally with either the victims or the people dealing with the victims. Subsequently, we're going to be talking to one of the victims who's been speaking out and so bravely over the years, Sammy Woodhouse. She's coming on at 12:30. Also going to talk about that car mis-selling scandal, mis-selling financial agreements. £829 an average compensation for millions of motorists who were mis-sold those car finance agreements. But is that just the tip of the iceberg? All that coming up, plenty more besides. Delighted to say, still joining me in the studio is Tom Slater. He's editor of Spiked Online. Afternoon once again to you. I just want to reiterate to people some of the breaking news we've got in terms of grooming gangs. Nigel Farage has been speaking at a press conference in Heathrow. He's also been talking about how the reform would scrap air passenger duty if they became elected, but he's also said he has absolutely no faith that the grooming gangs inquiry will give justice for victims, being very, very clear about that. That is a big concern, Tom, isn't it? That actually, we've heard it all before. Yeah. This has been on the front page of newspapers since 2011. Absolutely. As you pointed out, other, Labour MPs talking about this, more than 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, we are simply, people just don't have any faith that the authorities are going to get to the truth.
They really don't, and therefore I think it falls to the inquiry and to the establishment more broadly to earn that trust, not just of the survivors first and foremost, but the country, who have read about these horror stories periodically over decades now and seen that nothing was done about it. Worse than that, people who raised the alarm were dismissed as racists and bigots and all kinds of horrific things in order to just try and put this issue away. So we'll see what happens with the inquiry. Some of the signs are positive, but we wait to see if it'll actually live up
do we have faith? But sceptical faith perhaps. But also just finally, on terms of breaking news in the last hour or so, Metropolitan Police have said in relation to the sacking of Scott Mills from Radio 2 earlier this week, announced yesterday, where he was questioned in 2018 over allegations of serious sexual offences against a teenage boy, that boy was aged under 16 at the time of the alleged offences between 1997 and 2000, and at that time Scott Mills would have been in his 40s. That is what the allegation is. No charges brought, no convictions certainly, but we're still waiting a statement from Scott Mills. So that's you up to date on everything. Well, there's also the background of the small matter of a war in the Middle East. Certainly today, the Prime Minister is hosting an emergency COBRA meeting where he's over the crisis, where he's basically saying the government can't do it on its own, dealing with the threat to fuel shortages and price hikes as a result of the closing of the Strait of Hormuz as part of that Iran conflict. Well, here to talk about where we are and where that war could lead is Marty Youssefiani. He's joining us in the studio. He's an Iranian political strategist based in Washington, D.C., but a former advisor to the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Thank you so much for joining us, Marty. Really appreciate you coming into the studio as well. It's interesting that we've had Donald Trump. I mean, he makes a different statement. He makes a different announcement every day. Is the war over? Is it not over? Does he want the West's help, the rest of the NATO's help, or does he not? He has said he would obliterate even, every energy terminal, electricity, even desalination plants across Iran, what would frankly be a clear war crime if the Strait of Hormuz is not open. He's also talked about possibly walking away from the war, declaring victory, even if the strait is still closed and impacting the rest of the world and many of his Arab neighbours. Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has said the war in terms of its aims is beyond the halfway point, but he doesn't want to give a timeline. Where do you, presumably with rather good sources within Iran, where do you believe we are in this conflict?
Thank you for having me, Julia. Whenever you talk about war, the unpredictability of the downstream cascading of all sorts of challenges is exactly what we're seeing today. I think if the Iranian people had to choose between regime continuation or regime change at any means, today they see it didn't happen within the first 10 days or a week or after the objective that was decapitation. So the issue is what next? The issue is the political solution. Yeah. Kinetic action, elegant terminology for war, does not, never, we've been here before, never includes political solutions. And so we need to see as Iranians what the next chapter is. Now, in terms of the president in Washington moving the target, that's a strategic approach that he has had on many fronts, constantly moving the target. Yeah. But in terms of the Iranian people wanting to see what's next, that is the driving concern.
And this is the thing, there are kind of three different war aims here, aren't there? There's what the Americans want in terms of the nuclear threat and, you know, long-standing issues over the Iranian threat to the Americans, and of course it goes way back to the hostage crisis, you know, way back under Jimmy Carter, and the slaughter by Iranians of American troops, no doubt at all. We've got the Israelis concerned about the existential threat to Israel from the clear statements of intent from Iran and the funding of the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis and others. But then we've got the Iranian people in Iran, and we've got the Iranian exiles, you know, like yourself, like the Crown Prince, exiled along with his father, the former Shah of Iran in '79, and many Iranians that I know in London as well, who are desperate for the regime to fall, to bring in democracy, to turn Iran to what it was before the Ayatollahs took charge, which was an incredibly wealthy, thriving, pretty free country. Let's not pretend things were perfect. This was never, you know, the Crown Prince's father was not a benevolent, you know, elected Democrat. He was not. He was a dictator. However, rather better than where we are right now. So where do the Iranian people's demands fit into this? Do you think they're being taken into account at all by Netanyahu and Trump?
That is the biggest concern. A war at this rate is not sustainable. Even taking over the Strait of Hormuz is not realistic. Can it be done? Of course, but is it sustainable? Absolutely not.
And in an election year, for
in an election year, all of those elements that we all know are preventive. The markets, the ammunition stockpiles, the political election around the corner, the general pressure within the region because trade and commerce has stopped. But the only element here, in my view, that has not been cultivated, nurtured, offered patronage is the Iranian people inside, 92 million people, who can be mobilized not necessarily through exiled imports, but the people who actually move the needle inside the country, and that's where I think we need to have a recalibration of attention.
I mean, were you disappointed, presumably your former boss, Reza Pahlavi, disappointed by the abject failure of the Americans and Donald Trump to do what he said he would do in January, which was the threat that went to Iran? If the Iranian authorities started, you know, slaughtering protesters on the streets, they would take action. They would, you know, Donald Trump, go onto the streets. You know, we're behind you. We've got your backs. America didn't have their backs. 30,000 plus. That's the latest figure we know of. It may be more. Young protesters, people who just done nothing other than say, we just want to live freely, going onto the streets late December, in January. We've seen executions going on even, you know, this week of young people living a completely normal life who've gone onto the streets, who've been imprisoned, who are now being executed for the crime of just wanting freedom. This is a brutal regime. They care not a jot about any person in the country. Do you think that's a failure by the US government to have actually backed up that threat to the Iranian regime at the time? Or should he just simply have not made a promise to the Iranian people that he was not prepared to keep?
Well, I think it's an issue of calibrating ability to deliver the rhetoric.
Yeah.
The rhetoric was driven by the impetus to tell the Iranian people that we are on your side. But reality was, how can you go an aerial attack and protect? Reality with what is being said is not possible. We see that now. The point here is, when there is no signature of a crumbling infrastructure, political infrastructure. Number two, if there is no indication of a crumbling of the command and control of the security system. Number two. Number three, when there is no indication of a ready, standby, clear, viable political alternative to take over, that's when you see that the needs and demands of the streets will not match with any...
And the Crown Prince is the obvious option there, but actually not very much wanted by the the political elites in either Israel or in America, but they're very, very popular among young people who make up a huge proportion of the Iranian population, who were obviously born since the 79 revolution. Why aren't people on the streets? I suppose there's an element where, Donald Trump has said, when he first made his speech from Mar-a-Lago, when he launched the war at the end of the month, last month, he said, look, I'm not after regime change, but if you want to rise up, this is the opportunity for the Iranian people to rise up. Why have they not done that? What is stopping them from doing that? Is it the fact that they will simply be mown down by the IRGC's machine guns?
That's exactly it. Julia, people need to not go too far. For 10 years, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, helped, sustained, and held up Bashar Assad in Syria by slaughtering over 500 to 600,000 Syrians. Who did that? It was the IRGC of the Iranian regime. They have practiced it, they have executed it, and ideologically they are committed to that. And so when we ask why don't our boys and girls go to the streets, they have. And 50,000 of them got slaughtered.
You believe the number is 50,000? I mean, we literally don't know, do we?
One is too many. The regime itself has said minimum of 6,000 when the President of the United States says 32,000. Whatever the number is, one too many. But the point here is, you asked why not? They are. They are. But they cannot do it alone.
So what do you want? What do you want from the Americans, from the Israelis? Because again, the Israelis, what government has always made very clear, their argument is with the regime, not with the Iranian people. Same thing from the American president as well, or from other countries who have supposedly still some influence in this. What do the Iranian people want?
I think as an Iranian American, proud of being both American, which gave me refuge and taught me freedom and liberty and electioneering and democracy, and as an Iranian proud inheritor of a civilization, I need to make sure that attention is given to how the civilization continues practically the day after. Political patronage and nurturing has been lacking in terms of the political enterprise in Iran.
And this is about the nation building, isn't it? But of course a lot of Americans and Brits as well, I think all around the Western world, they feel that they've got their fingers burnt with Afghanistan, with Iraq, these attempts to nation build. But explain to my audience, who, if they're regulars, will already know this, how different Iran is from Afghanistan and Iraq. And when people just go, oh, countries over there in the Middle East, they're all, they're all the same. They're not all the same, are they?
Excellent point, Julia. You've nailed it right there. We've heard this before, that oh yes, but Iran is different. Oh yeah, but so and so is different. But the remarkable distinction here is, like it or not, 47 years, even under this regime, the Iranian people have fakely, artificially even, have practiced. Iranian communities all over the world, the Iranian people inside 92 million, when you look at them, among the best educated, fully connected with the world. When you connect with them right now digitally through social media or whatnot, you see it is a modern, it is a secular, progressive-looking street in direct contrast with the regime itself. So that is what you're investing in. These are people who want to be part of the free world, much, much different than some of our neighbors, which have never seen that before. Iran had its constitutional monarchy, constitutional revolution 100 years ago, brought constitutionalism as a value. So checks and balances, democratic values, all are good, but if they're not patronized and nurtured by the West, they will just be shut down.
If you could give your best guess, and let's face it, when we're dealing with people like Donald Trump and indeed the Iranian regime, whether you can trust a single word that gets said to be true and to be meant, what's your best guess about what is going to happen over the coming days, weeks and months?
I fear the collective pressures that we all have talked about, and certainly you've really developed with your audience over the months and years. The granular issue is that there will need to be a quick exit to settle this fireworks down. But I fear, as the Pottery Barn rule says, when you break it, you own it. I fear no matter how quickly we say it's done, it'll be a broken enterprise there that needs attention, and the ultimate solution is to look at the pluralistic society of Iran, make sure whatever the solution is mirrors that.
Okay, really good to get you in, to get your analysis. Marty Youssefiani, he's an Iranian political strategist based in DC, former advisor to the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. Thank you so much for joining us. At 12:17 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to get reaction. I'd love to hear your calls and your calls on the booming gangs in particular. 0344 499 1000. If you want to react to what Marty had to say, feel free to call in as well. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:20 is the time. Tom Slater still with me, editor of Spiked Online. We talked very little today about the Iran conflict, but actually an awful lot of where we are in terms of economically in this, this Cobra meeting that the Prime Minister is chairing today, all of that is all coming about because of the Iran conflict. We talk about the price rises and whether or not duty needs to be slashed, inflation, everything. I mean, it's the economy, stupid, is the thing that, very sensible advisor to Bill Clinton many years ago pointed out was the only thing that mattered in elections. Price rises are what the Iran conflict's going to mean, but it is interesting that, when you talk to someone from Iran who about what they want from this conflict, perhaps rather different from what a lot of people are concerned about.
No, exactly. There's all kinds of competing interests here, all kinds of competing plans and war aims, and the big question mark really has always been over the Americans, because Marco Rubio can be wheeled out to say here is the 4 objectives we have, and yet that seems to often be sort of contradicted by events.
Well, Donald Trump contradicts every 3 minutes.
Yes, and it depends where depending on your perspective, is either playing a kind of masterful game of madman theory, what was also while trying to keep the markets steady with his various pronouncements, or he is just all over the place like a shopping trolley. It will take months, years to work out which of those two.
Well, we'll have to wait for the books at the end of his regime. Truth, I mean, that's the thing. In terms of what's going on here, Keir Starmer are organising this emergency Cobra meeting today. I do hope he's listening more than talking. I mean, fine for me to say that, but it does seem to me he hasn't got many ideas about how to deal with things. Basically saying the government can't do it on its own, calling in big energy companies. We had a meeting the day before, the logistics people, the energy companies as well. But basically, they basically say, can you cut your prices, please? when actually the energy we pay on our bills for our heating our homes, not such a big concern right now with the new Ofgem cap coming in as of tomorrow on April the 1st, but also it's summer. It's been a bit chilly in the evenings, but mostly you can certainly survive without having your heating on if you're worried about your bills. But most people can't survive without putting diesel or petrol in their cars, and diesel in particular has gone up massively. Why diesel more than petrol? Really simple answer, because we basically don't produce any of our own petrol. We import more diesel. Everything we import more of, what a surprise, we end up paying more for. It's almost like if we produced our own, who would have thought of that? That might have helped us. But it's extraordinary that they're basically saying, can you cut your prices? Because what other help can these companies offer? I mean, what else are they going to do? They're not going to magic it up out of thin air, are they? But when you fill up at the pumps, majority of what you pay is in various different taxes to the government. I mean, and even when you have the VAT, like you have the fuel duty, and then you have VAT on the... You have a tax on the tax, for the love of God. It's extraordinary. The government is raking in an extra £20 million a day in extra tax right now. It's equivalent of £8 billion a year. But the Treasury has pointed out, but we're also seeing our interest rate costs of our debts going up as well. So actually, it evens out. I mean... And then the IMF says we're facing the biggest hit from the energy shock of any basic Western country. Why? Because of our insane net zero policies.
No, we've always been much more exposed to the potential consequences of this. And I think what this meeting between Keir Starmer and various industry heads indicates is that it's not entirely clear what to do next. There's obviously things that might need to be thought about further along down the line, the kind of rationing of supply, prioritising supply for ambulances, emergency services, the sort of thing that we last saw in this country in the early 2000s with the blockades of fuel and oil refineries that took place then. But it's Keir Starmer has made abundantly clear throughout the various crises that's to deal with that he is not really a man for moments like this. And I think that there's an element of flailing around and hoping someone will come up with the solution for him rather than having a plan that he can impress upon them at one of these meetings.
Absolutely. Well, I mentioned in our interview with Marty Yusufiani that President Trump has been making a statement. He's taken aim at the UK again. He tells Britain we should buy our jet fuel from the US because of the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz, or go get your own oil. He's also said the French have been very unhelpful. I mean... That's a statement for all time. Not so useful on the stopping the migrant boats either. He's written on Truth Social, all of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran. I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the US. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait and just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. That's a little bit worrying. I think he's woken up in a very bad mood this morning. But that is very, very worrying. You know, it basically say the US is not going to be there for you anymore. That sounds like another threat over NATO. But then he did say, hey, Ukraine's your problem, Europe. You deal with Ukraine. Well, there is an argument back. Well, you started the war in Iran. You're the ones who've got the issue with Iran. Your problem.
Yes. No,
can't have it both ways.
You can't have it both ways. And that's how it's played out with Hormuz, where obviously this war was launched by Israel and America. And yet the messages out of the White House have been almost it will be Europe or broadly speaking, the Allies' responsibility to keep those shipping lanes open. These things don't really...
America doesn't get its oil from the Strait of Hormuz. Doesn't make any difference.
Doesn't really add up. Although, that was one of the actually more benign and positive aspects of the American empire, was keeping the shipping lanes open. So if he's not willing to do that, then a lot of big questions are raised, aren't there, about what we're getting out of the deal.
Absolutely. And no doubt the Prime Minister, whether he's in the Cobra meeting or not right now, will probably be notified of that statement. Right, let's go to your calls right now. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. A lot of you getting in touch about the grooming gangs. Obviously, after we had that announcement, the National Grooming Gang inquiry, and we had the terms of reference, how long it will take, the money, what they're going to do, and I'd say on the face of it, it looks very encouraging, but a lot of you very untrusting. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk to Sammy Woodhouse, who's been a prominent survivor who's spoken out about her experiences. Let's go right now though to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000. Sally is in West Wales, and Sally, you are also one of the, far too many survivors from the Rochdale rape gang, aren't you?
Yeah, how are you, Julie? Are you all right?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly all right. I've not had to go through what you've gone through, my darling.
Yeah, mine was in 1987. I'm not really sure how much I can say on here.
What do you mean? I mean, a case is ongoing in court, or?
Well, I have actually got. It was Sammy Woodhouse that put me in touch with solicitors.
Great.
So yeah, I'm not sure how much I can say.
So it's on. So people are being prosecuted now.
No, the solicitors are looking into it.
Okay, right. So I suppose, well, without naming anybody, can you give us I suppose, a broad outline of what happened to you?
Well, I was a bit of a lost child when I was a teenager. So I was walking the streets at 13 and 14. Yeah. And obviously we was interacted with quite a few different men in Rochdale. And me and my friend was two because we was best friends. So we used to go everywhere together. Yeah. And yes, we had a lot of interaction with them. We was taken into flats. Mm-hmm. We was taken into restaurants. I had a thing where one of my friends, she was locked in a flat with them, and I had to drag her out of the flat because it was a 27-year-old man that had her captured in a flat. Yeah. And when you say interactions, you mean you had sex with them? Well, one or two of them, but it wasn't so much sex. It was more blowjobs. There was a lot of blowjobs involved. Right. Okay. And you were under 16. I was 14 when it started. 14. Yes, I was 14. And again, they know who to target, don't they? Because they target girls like you who've been failed by your family and failed by care system and teachers and. You're in easy prey. That's what they called you, easy prey. I agree. Yeah, they do seem to target vulnerable girls. They tend to have a radar for girls that are little bit lost. And obviously, I was in and out of the care system as well as a child. Yeah. So yeah, they do pick their targets. Yeah. But it lasted. A lot of the abuse was around the Milkstone Road, Whitworth Road area, Tweedale Street. Because the children's home that I was in was around the corner from there. So it was kind of almost happening in plain sight. Did you report? I mean, I think you told my sister you were raped and raped at knife point. I was 16. I was picked up outside a pizza parlour. Outside a taxi rank. Mm-hmm. Because I'd gone to get pizza and I'd been picked up from there by two of them, and I know their names. I know who they are. Mm-hmm. And I was dragged to a flat in Failinge. And obviously, I don't want to go into the details, but yeah, it was quite horrific. And obviously, they put a blade to my throat. Oh my God! And obviously, you don't report it because there's a lot of stigma around teenage girls hanging around with Pakistani boys or Pakistani men. You and the stigma was on you rather than them. And so you didn't report it. And is this so? Solicitors are looking into it now. Do you think that people knew, though? Do you think that people in Australia, do you think your teachers knew? Do you think the people in the care system, when you were in and out of care, do you think they knew? The teachers, because I didn't go to school. I was a bit of a naughty one. I never attended school. No, you weren't naughty. You were failed. You weren't naughty. Yeah. You were a kid. I wagged school a lot. Yeah, I wagged school a lot. But no, I know there was. I don't want to go into detail, but there was a serious attack. And I was told to just get a bath and be quiet. But it's not because they was trying to silence me. It's because they knew no one would believe me, and it wasn't. There was no point going to the police. No one would believe me because they'd give you a reputation of, they'd call you a dirty white whore. That's how they'd refer to you. Yeah. And then obviously they would tell us that white men are dirty because they're not circumcised. And I learned that at 14 about circumcision. And obviously I shouldn't know that at 14. No, yeah, exactly. Do you? Bringing it up to date now, I'm just so sorry. I mean, you're talking about it so matter-of-factly, but I know it's not matter-of-fact and it's a real thing that happened to you, and I'm just so sorry that you've been so failed by everybody in your life. But in terms of this inquiry now, do you have any faith that we're going to get to the bottom of this? Do you have any faith in the criminal justice system that the men who did this to you are going to face justice? Sally? Oh, no, we've just lost Sally's line. I do apologise. Sally, I hope you're still listening. We're going to keep fighting for you. We do our best here, we really do. And I know our guest, Sammy Woodhouse, is going to speak to you a couple of minutes still as well. I'm just going to take one more call very quickly. Greg is in Edinburgh. Greg, what do you want to say?
Yeah, good morning, Julia.
Afternoon,
just like I think that actually the inquiry is a waste of time. It's superfluous. What we know is there are criminal conduct by people in the police. I'm particularly interested as an ex-police officer. If I was working on a front counter or I took a phone call where anyone, but particularly a young child, had come in and said, I've been raped, I have been indecently assaulted, I know that I knew it was my duty to report that, to make a record of that.
But making a record's no sodding use if no action is taken to stop it from continuing to happen.
Exactly. But if I was told not to inquire into that, if I knew that was the policy, to me, simply, it's a case of you start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Yeah.
If Sally had gone into a police station and said, I was raped, and no one took a report of that rape, or no one failed to act on her report, you start at the bottom and you work your way up.
Who's responsible? At what point it stopped, that person gets prosecuted. Yeah, I know, and I think that's what I want this to come out of this. I don't want just an inquiry saying lessons be learned. I want punishments to be dealt, because that's the only way of stopping this from happening in the future. Greg, thank you so much for that call. I really appreciate that. Look, I'm going to read just a bit detail about a competition we've got. Then we're going to get to a break. Then we're going to be hearing from one of the survivors of the Rotherham child sex exploitation scandal. That's Sammy Woodhouse. First up, though, we are giving you the chance to win a life-changing £20,000. It's completely tax-free here on Talk. That's £20,000 straight into your bank account. Spend it, save it, splash it. It's entirely up to you. Here's how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 9th of April 2026, 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus, UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Very good luck with that. Let's go to a break. Up next, Sammy Woodhouse. You don't want to miss it. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. 12:36 is the time. Well, about 3 hours ago, we finally had the terms of reference of the Grooming Gang National Inquiry published by the chair, Baroness Anne Longfield. She's a former Children's Commissioner. She made a promise in her very first statement since being appointed back in December. Some 11 months after the Prime Minister, remember, said that anyone calling for a full national inquiry was just jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Well, eventually he did jump on that bandwagon, apparently. But he said the inquiry will not flinch from uncomfortable truths. There is a national inquiry. There are also going to be separate local inquiries, rolling reports. They're going to give information to the NCA who investigate serious instances of organised crime and will look into failures in particular of the police and other institutions. She said they are going to look into police forces, local authorities and others who failed to protect children, not turned a blind eye, and did more than that, actually, sometimes, in some cases, allegations of them getting involved. And they're also going to look into, she says, whether the ethnicity, culture or religion of either perpetrators or victims influenced patterns of offending, and whether these factors shaped the institutional response. She says they will not flinch from those uncomfortable truths. Well, what do you make of that? You've been getting in touch with extraordinary calls, but I'm very, very pleased to be speaking to my next guest now. Sammy Woodhouse is one of the survivors of the Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal. She exposed it with the Times way back in 2013. She has ever since then been an activist. She became lead on the rape gang inquiry set up by the MP Rupert Lowe last year. Sammy Woodhouse, I'm very grateful for you joining us. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Julia.
Right. I pose the first question, just big picture. You've heard the terms of reference. I'm sure you've read it in full detail. You keep totally abreast of all the details on this. Do you trust that this chair and Longfield and the terms of the reference of this inquiry are going to get to the bottom of this and is going to actually change anything?
I personally don't think that Anne Longfield should chair it. I know there's been a big debate on who, because, you know, let's be honest, every service throughout our country has been involved in some way or failing or being corrupt. I think for me, I don't have any faith in this inquiry because it's not going to cover enough. Now, they're focusing on 5 locations. We should be looking at every single town and city around the UK. Now, people are trying to pass this off as though it's a northern problem, you know, and it's only happening in places such as Rotherham and Rochdale. Yeah. I can promise you now it is happening in every town and city around the UK.
Well, we know at least 50,
I'd like to see
at least 50 have been identified. Although, of course, we've got Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, insisting it's not happening in London.
Well, there's been a lot more than 50 identified. I mean, even on our own inquiry, we've probably done about 4 times more than that now. But yeah, exactly. For London, you know, people are saying this doesn't happen in London. That's absolute nonsense. Yeah. Why on earth would anyone think that the capital of our country is off limits? You know, just like they're trying to say in Scotland that this is not happening. Yeah. It is happening absolutely everywhere. Now, I've been an activist for 13 years, and I've worked with nearly every police force in England and Wales. I've worked with schools, education, NHS. I've worked absolutely everywhere, and it is happening. And it's so frustrating for me as someone that's lived it, you know, and working in it, that I'm having the exact same conversations now than what as I was 13 years ago when I started speaking about this. Why is it taking this long, and how much more evidence do people need of what's happening in our country? We're talking about, you know, a mass rape of children being tortured, trafficked, murdered. They're taking bets in red rooms of how we can torture children. You know, you've got children that are being raped by animals. It's absolutely shocking, you know, what's happening. And then, of course, you've got the race and the religion element to it that no one dare go near because we can't offend Islam or Muslim. It's absolutely ridiculous and appalling how children and families have been treated in this country.
Yeah, and as you say, look, we know it's been happening. We know it's been happening around the country. We know who's doing it. We know who's it's being done to. And what we want is action. But is there a purpose to this inquiry to sort of pull it all together? Because we know we've told, there was the Alexis J looked into things in 2014. Of course, it barely touched this. And we know that the key issue here is, we know there's sexual abuse in every race, in every religion and none, and around the world. That's not the point. The key thing here was the deliberate targeting by one national heritage group, Pakistani Muslims, from largely a very small area in Pakistan, of white working class girls, basically because they were easy prey, easy fodder, no one cared about them. Like my last caller, they were in the care system, in and out, no one was looking after them, and they could basically get away with it. And the crucial thing is they got away with it because this is something crucial, and it's vital that the inquiry looks into this, tackling the issue that there was deliberate targeting by one group to another, but also crucially, they were not challenged by the police, they were not arrested, they were not prosecuted, no one did anything. But whether it was care homes, whether it was social workers, whether it was the police, whether it was anyone else, because community cohesion, don't want to be called a racist, don't want to be called an Islamophobe, and that was a bigger concern. And then you should say the mass rape, torture, beating, and yes, murder of young girls. Do you think that there's any possibility that if they can expose that in a report, that at least the people on the left who are still denying this, by the way, do you think that it can at least establish the facts incontrovertibly, and at least from then we can start to try and change things? Is there any scintilla of hope for you?
I don't think they'll ever expose the scale of it. And if they did, the entire country would crash, because the scale of this is just so large. I think that, you know, when we're talking about the left, there's always going to be people that will just never accept this. Yeah. And, you know, the truth of the matter is children are being sacrificed for the sake of diversity and for votes. You know, this is what it was all about. It was about politics. You know, the fact that people were so afraid to be called racist or Islamophobic, and they'd rather, you know, children be gang raped and tortured and everything else what's happened, is just absolutely sickening. And you know, when people say to me, well, you know, back then we didn't quite understand it. You know, you'd think that common sense tells you gangs of men raping children and torturing them. What kind of education do you need?
But also,
that's just common sense.
Times haven't changed that much. I mean, I know, you know, attitudes towards, you know, sexual harassment of women in offices has changed since the 1970s, or attitude to gang rape of children. I'm pretty sure when I was growing up, we all knew that was wrong then. Sammy, I know you've told people many times, and you've spoken about it, but it is important, and I don't want people to go into the, not for the like lascivious reasons, but just can you give us just a rough overview of what happened to you, from what age, and who you told, and what happened as a result of that?
Yeah, of course. So I met Arshad Hussain just after my 14th birthday. I was just on a local shop, so I suppose wrong place, wrong time. I was with a friend, and he knew my friend. He asked us to go for a spin in the car, and we said yeah. And of course, I had no idea, but that was going to be the moment that changed my life forever. And I would go on to be abused and physically for several years. I was also...
I'm so sorry. So there's a slight delay on my end. I'm so sorry. Were you a troubled teenager at the time? Were you in a happy, safe family environment? What was the background?
I came from a working class family. I was confident, bubbly. I had lots of friends. I was good at school. Yeah. I was a dancer from a very young age at 4, so I would travel all around the country, you know, from little gold medals. Yeah. I stopped dancing when I was probably about 11 or 12 years old, and that's when things started to go downhill for me. And I started, you know, kind of hanging about with friends on the streets. So I wouldn't say I was vulnerable, apart from the obvious fact of I was just a child.
You were there and you were available. Okay, so what happened?
Yeah. So I was abused by Arshad Hussain, and the process started really, really quickly. And I was taken to hotels, B&Bs, flats, houses. I even lived with his family for a while. There was a lot of women facilitating, you know, houses and things as well. You know, people think that this kind of crime can only be committed by a man, but our women was involved in this as well. Yeah. So, but I became pregnant twice. First, when I was 14, I was forced to get an abortion because my parents wanted to use the DNA from the baby to prosecute him. I again got pregnant when I was 15. I gave birth to my son when just after my 16th birthday. But I never saw this as, you know, a child being exploited. I thought this man was my boyfriend. It was happening to a lot of people around me. A lot of people thought that it was okay, but, you know, my parents, my family, they, you know, was reporting this. Yeah. The police saw this as that I was making a lifestyle choice. I got viewed as a packy shagger, his mistress. My father was threatened. My father was collecting evidence, including my diary, and, you know, lots more things that got destroyed. The police, so PC Hassan Ali, and I can name these people, so it has been proven in a court of law. He went on to be a Labour politician called Jahangir Akhtar. So he was a relative of my rapist, and he went on to be the deputy leader of Rotherham Council. So they made a no prosecution deal with him, and this is how I exposed Rotherham. Yeah. So they said to him on one occasion when I'd been abducted, if you bring her over to the petrol station and hand her over, we won't prosecute you. So that's what he did. So I got dropped off, and he was allowed to go on his way to further abuse me, to further abuse lots more children. There was also another occasion when a property got raided and I was caught half naked in bed with him, and they arrested me because I had a baton, which is classed as, an offensive weapon, and they let him go free. So there was all these occasions that they could have stopped him.
And they didn't. So the idea that, well, they just didn't know. They did know. And you said, children were sacrificed for votes. It was just politically easier to allow this to carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. Labour are just up to their neck in this. But the thing is, we can't just blame Labour. The Tories have been in power for many years as well. It seems to be every political group. And I'll be honest, I've worked in government with politicians for 13 years. There's one person I've hope left in, and that was Rupert Lowe. And that's why I worked with Rupert Lowe on the inquiry, because, about a year ago, he contacted me and, he said, I've heard this has been happening. Is it true? What do I need to do? I told him what to do, and he walked straight into Parliament and he did it. And, I'll be honest. And he certainly
helped keep it on the front page. And that's the thing. We need to keep people talking about it, and don't turn away, because it's all too gruesome and horrible, because we need to talk about it, and we need to know about it, and then we need to do something to stop it. Yeah, that's the crucial thing.
But look what they're doing to people that have been trying to raise this. I couldn't even tell you how many times people tried to have me arrested. And I've had people at my home, I've had people target my children. I've been through worse in the last 13 years as an activist for exposing this than what I did as a child. And it's not just me that's going through that. And it's not just a thing of the past either. Anyone that dares to challenge this becomes a target. That has to stop.
Absolutely. Sammy, I think you're an amazing advocate on this. You've done incredible work, and incredibly... it always sounds patronising to say, but you are brave. This is proper courage. Sammy Woodhouse, one of the survivors of the Rotherham child sexual exploitation scandal, who actually exposed it herself. Thank you so much for taking the time. Tom Slater, the calls we've had, our guests, it's mind-blowing. It's just... I still just can't quite get my head around a lot of it, even all these years discussing this.
No, exactly. And yet we're only really still at the beginning of working out the full scale of what went on after decades of denialism, and at the beginning of trying to get some level of justice. This is a sort of poison that's been in the heart of so many of our communities, which has driven disaffection, which has driven it's the most grotesque sense in which many communities have been left to wither on the vine, their concerns ignored, and demonised even. So cutting this out now is absolutely essential, but it's unfortunately it is, even after many, many decades of this issue trying to be reckoned with, we're only really at the beginning of that.
Exactly. Can I say, one of the most telling things she said there was actually about the women being in a house, but actually there were plenty of women in the family who would have known exactly what was going on and said and did nothing. 12:49 is the time. I'm going to take a break. Up next, going to talk about that car finance scandal with the consumer journalist Harry Kind. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:52 is the time. Do you know what? I feel like we're taking a bit of a breather from the horrors of the grooming gang inquiry of the information, but we just simply cannot turn our heads away from that stuff. We need to know what's happened so we can actually challenge it and stop it and take action and make sure it doesn't happen in the future. That is the absolute key. But let's talk right now about something which, rather lighter, because it's just a car finance scandal as opposed to a grooming gang scandal. But millions and millions of drivers, 12 million drivers it would appear, were missold motor finance agreements, and they should receive compensation this year, according to the Financial Conduct Authority, averaging around £829 per person. That's their proposal for redress scheme, costing lenders a total of £9.1 billion, and it's going to see fewer loan agreements eligible for compensation. Many who have got these finance deals may choose to actually go with their own legal action. There have been some group actions as well. But regulators said firms are expected to pay £7.5 billion to people who took out eligible motor finance deals, and the administrative cost of the scheme is forecast to reach £1.6 billion. Well, let's talk about this with Harry Kind. He's a consumer journalist at the Everyday Expert. A very good afternoon to you, Harry.
Afternoon, hi.
Thank you very much for being light relief on the show today, Harry. So tell us, who are the people who are eligible for this, and how will they know they are eligible?
Well, not just light relief, but, a huge cash injection for consumers, £829.
Not to be sniffed at.
Something like 12 million people who have basically been ripped off. These are people who have gotten these car finance. If you've bought a car new, you will have likely used some kind of car finance. If you bought that between 2007 and 2024, the end of 2024, you're very likely to be eligible. Something like 50% of those who have bought a car in that period are likely to be eligible.
And this is where you don't just pay all. It's not car lease deals necessarily, is it? Or is it just even if you've just done a payment plan?
So it would be hire purchase and PCPs. It wouldn't include any leases, and it wouldn't include people buying, cash up front outright. So it's a large group of people, but the problem is, because it's about being missold, about not being told all the information, you wouldn't necessarily know that you were one of the people who are missold to. So luckily, you have the FCA basically saying it's on the lenders to track people down, to find out who they have missold these to and make sure they are made whole. And it's very easy for anyone to make a claim, even if they aren't sure either way. You can just find out who you borrowed that money from, write a letter through one of the templates online. Martin Lewis at Money Saving Expert, he's got a very good one. And you can go through that, put that in, and
they'll tell you. They'll look up the results, because lots of us, let's face it, if you bought a car back in 2010, you've probably not got a record of that. Or you've moved house, you just don't have a record of it anymore. The paperwork went in the bin when you moved, and you haven't got it. But that record is kept somewhere. These companies are required to have it. Here's the thing, though: have these companies got a spare £9 billion between them?
Yes, fortunately. So this is,
because they were making money off everyone.
So this is the money that we've been giving them over the last few years. And if anything, a lot of experts would say it's less than the total money that we've been giving them. So this isn't, a one-for-one. They will still come out of this with a profit. However, this is going to be a big hit. Lloyds have said they've put aside a few billion to have to pay for this.
Yeah.
And yet with all of that, in the 2 weeks after the Supreme Court judgment, which kind of started all of this, stocks went up. The share value of these companies rose.
Because it was less than they thought they might have to pay. But here's the thing, if they're still... really, companies like this should be forced out of business if they don't. How were people missold, though? What was the information that the company knew, or the deal that the company had, which most people wouldn't have been aware of or were not properly told about, that was so unfair?
The majority of these cases are where a salesperson or a dealership had an arrangement where if you gave someone a higher interest rate on their loan, then some of that would be given to the dealer as a commission. And that was in place, and you weren't aware of it.
So you paid more, someone else benefited, didn't tell you they were on commission, and they're giving you advice, as they're required to do. And then you vote. So if you get your £829, and bearing in mind some people would be more, some people less, depending on what car they had to deal with, are they going to be in pocket for all the extra money they paid? Or are they still going to be out of pocket, some of them?
So some people potentially will lose out. Some people may well, gain a little bit more. What the FCA have done is said, do you know what? We're going to keep this simple, because by keeping it simple, we're going to hit as many people as possible and get.
Yeah, but I've got to be honest with you, this doesn't sit right with me, because quite clearly there needs to be an extra cost, and a huge extra cost to the companies that did this as a punishment.
Yeah, and I do think there's a battle here between the perfect being the enemy of the good and not having a situation where we have the PPI kind of scandal, where we did see a lot of people making money off the back of it. And that would be the worst kind of option, would be that a load of people don't get what they needed. There's a whole industry that kind of crops up that makes a lot of money. Yeah. Some people lose out. In this way, at least a lot of money gets to people. I'm sure there are some car finance companies who will be feeling the pressure from this. And hopefully it does put pressure on, agencies, different companies to not exercise this kind of bad behaviour.
I would suggest that if you're not allowed to do it, that you're deceiving people, that actually that's fraud, and therefore people should be prosecuted and sent to prison. But I'm old-fashioned like that. I find that tends to motivate people rather more than having to pay back some money that they've already made money on. What do they care? Harry Kind, consumer journalist at Everyday Expert, thank you so much for explaining that to us. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. I mean, the reality is, we were talking about millions of people in this country, and also people who've taken out this sort of finance are more like to people who really, really need that 800 quid.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But there's one scandal like this over another, isn't it? Payment protection insurance, car finance insurance.
No one ever seems to get punished.
No one ever seems to get punished. And also you get these kind of almost ambulance-chasing industries pop up in their wake. It's all quite a grubby business, and also ends up with the taxpayer footing.
Yeah, and you go online and it'll be like, no, use that's the first sponsored advert online, and actually you're paying when it's a service for free to get that information about whether or not you are actually eligible for any of the payout. Again, I just think they need to be punished financially, to double what they made from it, because otherwise they'll just go, oh, we'll just assume we can get away with this, and if we can't, don't worry, we won't have lost any money. There's no disincentive.